The scent of pine, damp earth, and simmering tension clung to the air in the great hall of the Silver Moon Pack. Soldiers stood in perfect formation, faces grim beneath ceremonial masks carved to resemble wolves. Their polished armor reflected torchlight as they commemorated 10 years since the Blood Wars had ended. 10 years since 5 warring wolf kingdoms had been forcibly united under one crown. For most, this annual unity ceremony represented survival, strength, and the brutal peace that followed unification. For Elara Moonshade, it was merely another exercise in invisibility. She moved silently among the gathered dignitaries, a ghost in servant's tunic, her hands trembling slightly as she refilled goblets with dark-spiced wine. No one acknowledged her presence. To them, she was less than nothing, a wolfless woman in a society where one's worth was measured by the strength of their inner beast. The term hung over her existence like an executioner's blade, wolfless. In 22 years of life, she had never felt the primal connection that every other member of her species experienced from childhood. No fierce spirit lived within her breast, no beast to call upon in times of need. She was a flaw in the bloodline of an already disgraced family, a whisper of shame that tonight roared in her own ears. 10 years ago, her father, General Alaric Moonshade, had stood proud and defiant before being executed for treason against the newly crowned emperor. Elara, just 12 years old, had watched with dry eyes as the executioner's blade fell. The same blade that had severed her father's head had effectively ended her family's centuries of nobility. She remembered with painful clarity the man who had ordered her father's death. Emperor Kirin had been newly crowned then, his face carved from marble in midnight, his storm-gray eyes holding something that her child's mind couldn't comprehend. For the briefest moment, those eyes had met hers in the crowd. She had not looked away. Even then, without understanding why, she had not feared him as others did. Now she kept her gaze fixed on the polished stone floor, navigating between clusters of alphas and high-ranking warriors. Conversations hushed as she passed, then resumed once she was safely beyond earshot. This was her existence, to be present but unseen, to serve without recognition. Elara, the sharp voice of Matron Helena, head of domestic staff, cut through her thoughts. Hurry with that tray. The Emperor's council members need attending. Elara murmured an apology as she hoisted the heavy silver tray higher. A group of aging generals huddled near a massive hearth, their conversation growing heated. She approached cautiously, her keen ears catching fragments despite their attempts at privacy. "The disease spreads within the court," one whispered, his gray beard quivering with contained fury. "The Emperor has not been seen outside the Onyx Spire in 7 years. His absence emboldens our enemies beyond the northern wastes." "Perhaps the rumors of his affliction are true," another replied, voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "They say the Shadow King is bound to a demon that slowly consumes him from within." "Silence, fool," the first general hissed. "Speak such treason openly, and you'll find your head decorating the spire gates by morning." Elara's hand trembled, nearly spilling wine as she reached between them to refill their goblets. The generals fell silent, eyeing her with suspicion and disdain. She kept her face carefully blank, a skill perfected through years of navigating the dangerous waters of noble politics. "1,000 pardons, my lords," she murmured, eyes downcast. One of them grunted dismissively, another turned away as if she were invisible again. She retreated, relieved to have escaped notice. Across the vast hall, Elara caught sight of her sister Seraphina, a vision in embroidered silks that shimmered like moonlight on water. Where Elara was plain, Seraphina was striking, tall and graceful with their mother's silver eyes and their father's proud bearing. Most importantly, Seraphina possessed a powerful wolf spirit, one with silver fur and deadly speed. She was everything Elara was not. Seraphina stood surrounded by young warrior alphas, each vying for her attention. She was the family's last hope for redemption. If she could secure a mating with a high-ranking alpha, perhaps the stain of their father's failed rebellion would begin to fade. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded hall. Seraphina offered a small, tight smile that contained equal parts pity and instruction. "Stay in the shadows where you belong. It's safer for you there." Alara nodded, the silent message lodging like stones in her throat. She loved her sister, but Seraphina's protective instincts were a gilded cage, a constant reminder of her own inadequacy. Her only solace came in quiet, unnoticed moments. Earlier that day, she had found one of the hunting hounds whimpering in the kennels, its paw caught between loose floorboards. While others would have simply yanked it free, Alara had sat beside the frightened animal, her voice a low, soothing murmur, as she told it a simple tale of a star who feared the darkness. The hound's frantic struggles ceased as it listened, allowing her to gently work its paw free without a single snap of its powerful jaws. It was a useless gift, this strange calm she could project, this ability to weave tales that seemed to quiet the frantic hearts of beasts and children alike. Not strength, not power, nothing of value in a world where might determined one's place. A commotion near the great hall entrance pulled her from her thoughts. The crowd parted as a messenger in imperial colors burst through the massive oak doors, his face flushed with exertion. He rushed to Lord Magnus, Alpha of the Silver Moon Pack and host of the gathering, falling to one knee in formal deference. "My lord," the messenger gasped, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "the Imperial Guard approaches. Emperor Kirin comes in person to attend the unity ceremony." A shocked silence blanketed the hall, followed by an explosion of whispers. Emperor Kirin, the Shadow King, was coming here? The ruler who had unified the warring packs through brutal force rarely left his mountain fortress, the Onyx Spire. His presence was unprecedented, sending every noble in the region into a frenzy of preparation and anxiety. Lord Magnus's face paled beneath his ceremonial wolf mask. "How long?" he demanded. "They cross the outer boundaries now, my lord. The Emperor will arrive within the hour." The hall erupted into controlled chaos. Servants rushed to prepare, warriors adjusted their formal armor, and nobles hastily arranged themselves according to rank. Alara found herself swept up in the storm, ordered to prepare fresh wine and ensure every goblet in the hall shined like starlight. As she worked, she heard the stories whispered with renewed fervor. Tales told to frightened children and remind adults of their place. They said Emperor Kirin had no wolf but a demon bound to his soul, that his touch could freeze a shifter's blood, that he had never taken a mate because no female could withstand his darkness. Alara knew they were likely just stories, meant to cultivate his terrifying reputation and ensure compliance. Still, a cold dread pooled in her stomach as she polished silver goblets until her fingers ached. Seraphina found her in the kitchen, her beautiful face tense with excitement and fear. "Alara," she whispered, pulling her sister into a quiet corner. "Do you understand what this means? The Emperor hasn't attended a regional ceremony in 7 years. This is unprecedented." "What does it mean for us?" Alara asked, knowing us meant their disgraced family. Seraphina's eyes gleamed with calculated ambition. "Opportunity. The Emperor has no mate, no heir. If I can catch his eye—" "Sarah, no," Alara gasped. "The stories about him are just stories," Seraphina interrupted. "He is powerful, feared, but still a man, and our family needs this alliance more than ever." She gripped Alara's hands tightly. "Just stay invisible tonight, little sister. No clumsiness, no drawing attention. It's safer for everyone." Alara nodded, the familiar instructions settling like a shroud around her shoulders. Stay invisible, be nothing, survive. A sudden hush descended upon the great hall as the massive oak doors swung open. The air grew instantly colder, charged with an oppressive energy that made the hairs on Alara's arms stand on end. She pressed herself against a shadowed alcove, silver tray clutched to her chest like a shield. He stood framed in the doorway, a figure carved from midnight and fury. Emperor Kirin was taller than any shifter Alara had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of his kingdom. He wore no crown, no ostentatious finery, only simple black leathers that seemed to absorb the torchlight around him. A sword of ancient design hung at his hip, its hilt adorned with a single onyx stone that gleamed with unnatural darkness. His face was stark and beautiful in the way of predators and winter storms, all hard planes and sharp angles carved by both genetics and hardship. But it was his eyes that held the room captive. They were the color of a tempest sky, and they contained an ancient, unending pain that sent shivers down Alara's spine. He moved with a predator's silence, flanked by 6 Imperial guards in obsidian armor. Every alpha in the room, men who ruled their own territories with iron fists, bowed their heads in deference. The air crackled with his absolute authority. This was not just an alpha, this was power incarnate. Lord Magnus approached the Emperor with a deep, reverent bow. "Your Imperial Majesty, we are honored beyond measure by your presence. Silver Moonpack welcomes you to our humble territory." Emperor Kieran's gaze swept over the gathering, his expression betraying nothing. "Lord Magnus," he acknowledged, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "Continue your ceremony. I am here to observe." The ritual began anew, now performed with heightened intensity under the Emperor's watchful gaze. Warriors demonstrated their shifting prowess, displaying partial transformations that showcased fangs, claws, and lupine muscle structure. Females, in turn, presented their grace and power through ancient dance forms that mimicked hunt and battle. Alara kept her head down, moving along the edges of the room, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She felt like prey hiding from a hawk, desperately avoiding the Emperor's penetrating gaze as she served wine to nobles too terrified to drink it. Then it happened. A young alpha warrior, clumsy in his attempt to impress Seraphina during a demonstration of strength, stumbled backward. He crashed directly into Alara, sending her sprawling forward. The silver tray flew from her grasp, goblets shattering on the stone floor, spraying wine across polished boots. Alara herself was propelled forward, hands thrown out to break her fall. Time seemed to slow. A collective gasp, sharp and horrified, echoed through the suddenly silent hall. Her desperate, flailing hands had found purchase. One of them, small and trembling, landed directly on the back of a large, ungloved hand, the hand of Emperor Kieran. A shock, electric and profound, jolted up her arm. It wasn't cold as the legends claimed, it was searingly hot, a furnace of suppressed power, but beneath the heat she felt something else, a tremor, a deep resonant agony that pulsed against her skin like a living entity. Her unique quieting gift flared instinctively, a silent hum of comfort offered without conscious thought to that overwhelming pain. In that fleeting moment of contact, she sensed a vast darkness shot through with veins of fire, a torment so complete it nearly stole her breath. She looked up, her gaze colliding with his. The storm in his eyes was now a raging tempest. But it wasn't fury she saw there. It was pure, unadulterated shock. For a breathtaking instant, the suffocating aura of pain around him lessened, the crushing pressure in the room easing as if a storm had momentarily broken. He stared at her, truly seeing her not as a servant, not as a wolfless pariah, but as the source of an impossible momentary peace. The hall held its breath, waiting for the explosion, waiting for him to strike her down for her insolence. Emperor Kieran did not move. He simply stared, his harsh face a mask of disbelief. The silence stretched, becoming a weapon in itself. Alara felt her blood run cold. This was it. This was how her pathetic life ended, executed for daring to touch the untouchable king. The Emperor's lead guard, a grim-faced man with a jagged scar across one eye, took a step forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "Your Majesty," he prompted, his voice a low rumble of concern. But Kieran didn't seem to hear him. His focus was entirely on Alara, on the small, trembling hand that was still pressed against his own. The world had narrowed to that single point of contact. For the first time in a decade, the gnawing, relentless fire that lived under his skin had receded. It was not gone, but it had been banked, muted by the impossible calm emanating from this slip of a girl. It was a relief so profound it was dizzying, a breath of air to a drowning man. Elara, paralyzed by fear, finally snatched her hand back as if burned. The connection broke. The full, monstrous weight of his curse slammed back into him. A low groan escaped his lips, so quiet only he and the girl before him could hear it. His control, honed over years of agonizing discipline, nearly fractured. "What is your name?" he demanded. His voice was not a shout, but a low, dangerous command that cut through the silence more effectively than any roar. It was rough, like stones grinding together, and it held the exhaustion of a man who had not known a moment's peace in years. Elara's throat was dry. "Elara, Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She dared not look at Lord Magnus, whose face was a mask of apoplectic fury. She had shamed them all with her clumsiness, with her presumption. Emperor Kieran's stormy eyes swept over her, taking in the chief servant's tunic, the frantic pulse at her throat, the utter absence of a wolf's aura about her. She was nothing, a wolfless omega at best. "You will come with me," he stated. It was not a request. It was a decree, absolute and final. Another wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the hall. Seraphina's beautiful face was a picture of stunned disbelief, her carefully laid plans crumbling before her eyes. Lord Magnus stepped forward, his face pale. "Your Majesty, forgive her. She is simple, a wolfless girl from a shamed bloodline." His voice dripped with contempt. "She is of no use to you. I will have her punished severely for her clumsiness." Kieran's gaze shifted to the Alpha, and the temperature in the hall dropped another 10 degrees. "I did not ask for your opinion," he said, his voice laced with ice. "And I did not say she was of use. I said she will come with me." He turned his back on the sputtering Alpha, a dismissal more profound than any blow. His lead guard, Marcus, moved with practiced efficiency, his hand firmly but not unkindly closing around Elara's upper arm. She was being taken. Not punished, not killed, but taken. For what, she couldn't imagine. Was this some crueler fate? A life of servitude in his dark, isolated fortress? A plaything for a monstrous king? Her mind reeled with terrifying possibilities. As Marcus led her away, her legs moving on their own accord, she caught Seraphina's eye across the hall. Her sister's expression was a complex mixture of horror, confusion, and a tiny, ugly flicker of jealousy. Elara, the worthless one, had captured the attention of the most powerful man on the continent. The world had turned upside down in a heartbeat. The journey to the onyx spire was a blur of wind and fear. Elara was placed on a horse and tethered to Marcus's saddle, a silent piece of luggage rather than a person. The Emperor and his guard rode with a speed that devoured the landscape, their powerful war horses eating up the miles through the moonlit forest. They traveled through the Shadow Wood, a place of ancient legends where it was said the spirits of the first wolves still hunted beneath the dark canopy. The forest seemed to part before the Emperor's company, branches bending away as if in deference, or fear. Elara clung to her mount, the rhythmic pounding of hooves a counterpoint to the wild beating of her own heart. As they rode, she caught fragments of conversation between the guards, their voices low, but carrying in the night air. "Never seen His Majesty react that way to anyone." "She's wolfless. What possible use? Remember what happened to the last man who questioned the Emperor's decisions?" Silence followed that ominous reminder, and Elara's imagination filled with gruesome possibilities. She stole glances at Emperor Kieran, who rode ahead of the company. His back was a straight, unyielding line, his posture perfect despite the punishing pace. Not once did he look back at her. They arrived as the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of gray and rose. The onyx spire was not a castle in the traditional sense. It was a wound in the mountainside, a fortress of black volcanic rock that clawed at the sky. Massive towers spiraled upward, their peaks disappearing into mist. The entire structure seemed to reject the coming sunlight, remaining stubbornly shrouded in shadow. It was stark, forbidding, and utterly without warmth, a perfect reflection of its master. Elara was led through cavernous, echoing halls. There were no tapestries, no art, only cold stone and flickering torches that cast long, dancing shadows. The air was thin and frigid. It felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Guards and servants they passed averted their eyes from both the emperor and his unexpected guest. Their fear was palpable, a thick miasma that clung to the stone walls. She was deposited in a small, Spartan room with a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a single barred window overlooking a sheer drop. A prison cell, albeit one with clean linens. Marcus paused at the door. "The Emperor will summon you when he is ready," he said, his scarred face unreadable, but his eyes holding a hint of something that might have been pity. "Do not try to leave this room." Then he was gone, the heavy bolt of the door sliding home with a deafening thud. Alara was alone with her terror. Hours passed. She paced the small room, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. Why was she here? What did he want from her? The memory of his touch, of that searing heat and the deep well of pain beneath it, returned to her again and again. It was a mystery she couldn't solve. Later, a silent servant brought a tray with bread, cheese, and water. Alara was too terrified to eat. The sun set, plunging her cell into darkness, and still she waited. The silence of the fortress was more unnerving than the noise of the great hall had been. It was a dead silence, heavy and suffocating. Occasionally, she heard the distant echo of footsteps or the faint clang of metal against stone, but these sounds only emphasized the overwhelming quiet. It was well after midnight when the bolt on her door was drawn back. Marcus stood there, his expression as grim as ever. "The Emperor requires your presence," he stated simply. Her heart leapt into her throat. This was it. She followed him through winding, torch-lit corridors, deeper into the heart of the spire. They arrived at a pair of massive iron-bound doors, engraved with ancient wolf symbols. Marcus pushed one open and gestured for her to enter. The room was the Emperor's private study. It was vast, dominated by a huge hearth where a fire roared, its heat failing to warm the cold stone. Shelves overflowing with books and scrolls lined the walls, speaking to unexpected scholarly interests. Ancient weapons and maps were displayed in cases of dark wood and glass. But Alara barely noticed the room's contents. Her attention was fixed on the man standing by the fire, his back to her. Emperor Kirin had shed his leathers for a simple black tunic and trousers. He was staring into the flames, one hand braced against the stone mantelpiece. As she stepped into the room, he turned. The firelight cast his face in harsh relief, accentuating the shadows under his eyes. He looked tired, worn down to the bone by some invisible burden. And then she saw it. For a split second, as he moved, the sleeve of his tunic rode up his arm. Dark, shadow-like veins pulsed just beneath his skin, an inky corruption that seemed to writhe with a life of its own. He saw her gaze flicker and instantly pulled the sleeve down, his expression hardening into a familiar cold mask, but it was too late. She had glimpsed his vulnerability, a confirmation of the agony she had sensed. He was not just a tyrant. He was a man in constant, excruciating pain. "Come here," he commanded, his voice low and strained. Alara approached cautiously, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes on the floor. "I will not harm you," he said, though his tone held no reassurance. "I want you to do something for me." He paused, and she could feel the weight of his stare. "Touch my hand as you did before." The command hung in the air between them, sharp and strange. Alara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. Touch him willingly? Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to cower, to do anything but obey. He was the Shadow King, a being of immense, terrifying power. To touch him felt like sacrilege, like inviting a lightning strike. Yet she remembered the flicker of shock in his eyes, the momentary easing of the oppressive aura around him. She remembered the pulsing, shadowy veins on his arm, a visible sign of the torment she had sensed. He was not asking for a show of dominance. He was asking for relief? I don't understand, Your Majesty, she stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. A muscle feathered in his jaw. You do not need to understand. You need to obey. His voice was tight with impatience, but also with a thread of something else. Desperation. It was a sound so at odds with his powerful persona that it startled her more than any threat. Slowly, hesitantly, she took a step closer. The heat from the fire warmed one side of her face, while the chilling presence of the Emperor cooled the other. He extended his right hand, the same one she had touched before. It was bare now, the glove removed. His fingers were long and calloused, a warrior's hand, but it was held unnaturally still, as if restraining a violent tremor. Elara's own hand felt cold and clammy. She raised it, her movements shaky and uncertain. Her fingertips hovered just above his skin. She could feel the heat radiating from him, a palpable aura of power and pain. Taking a shallow, steadying breath, she closed the distance. The moment her skin made contact with his, the same jolt as before shot through her, but this time she was prepared for it. It was a current of pure energy, a meeting of two opposing forces. His power was a raging inferno. Hers was a cool, quiet spring. As she flattened her palm against the back of his hand, she felt the deep, thrumming agony within him once more. She didn't pull away. Instead, acting on an instinct she didn't know she possessed, she focused. She let that quiet, soothing part of herself flow from her, not as a thought, but as a feeling. She imagined a calm, silent pool of water dousing a furious fire. Kieran's breath hitched. His entire body went rigid. Through their connection, Elara felt the change. The screaming torment inside him didn't vanish, but its sharpest edges were blunted. The 1,000 needles became a dull ache. The raging inferno subsided to a manageable burn. He closed his eyes, a flicker of profound, bone-deep relief crossing his harsh features. It was the first time she had seen him look anything other than pained or angry. He looked peaceful. They stood like that for a long moment, locked in a strange, silent tableau. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the soft whisper of their breathing. Elara's fear began to recede, replaced by a bewildering sense of purpose. This was what he wanted. This was why he had brought her here. She was his antidote. Finally, he pulled his hand away, breaking the connection. The relief on his face vanished, replaced by his usual guarded mask, but she could see the effort it took. He looked at her, his storm-gray eyes intense and analytical. "How?" he asked, his voice rough. "What magic is this? You are wolfless." I don't know," Elara answered truthfully. "I have no magic. I can sometimes calm things. Frightened animals, crying children, nothing more." She looked down at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "It has never been like this." He paced before the fire, his movements restless, caged. "For 10 years, since my ascension, I have been afflicted. A curse on my bloodline. It is a constant pain, a fire in my veins that never ceases." His voice was flat, clinical, as if discussing a stranger's condition. "The greatest healers in the 5 kingdoms have found no cure. Mages have found no counterspell." He stopped, turning to face her with an expression of bewildered anger. "Yet you, a wolfless girl from a backwater pack, can soothe it with a touch." The confession stunned her into silence. The rumors were true, but they were also wrong. It wasn't a demon he was bound to, but a curse, a decade of unrelenting agony. The thought was horrifying. It explained his coldness, his isolation, his fearsome reputation. They were all defenses, armor built to hide an unbearable weakness. "You will stay here," he said, his back still to her. "You will remain in my presence. When I require it, you will provide this." He gestured vaguely with his hand. "In return, you will have my protection. Your family will be elevated. Your pack will be rewarded. You will want for nothing." It was a transaction. Her strange, useless ability in exchange for safety and fortune, a golden cage instead of a life of humiliation. It should have felt like a victory, a reversal of her miserable fate. Instead, it felt like a different kind of servitude. "What if I refuse?" The words were out before she could stop them, a small spark of defiance she didn't know she had. Kieran turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. The air grew cold again. "Refusal is not an option." His voice was soft, dangerous. You have seen what happens in my lands to those who defy me. Do not mistake my desperation for weakness, girl. You are my property now." The threat was clear, and the brief moment of connection they'd shared vanished like smoke. He was still the Shadow King, and she was still his prisoner. And so her new life began, bound to the most dangerous man in 5 kingdoms, a living balm for a curse she didn't understand. She was a caged bird, her wings clipped, her song commanded. Yet as she followed Marcus back to her room, now a suite adjoining the Emperor's chambers, Alara couldn't help but wonder about the man behind the monster, the one whose eyes had shown such profound relief at her touch, the one who, for a brief moment, had looked at her as if she were precious beyond measure. The darkness of the onyx spire swallowed Alara whole. Her new chambers were a stark contrast to her previous cell, spacious, adorned with heavy furniture of polished black wood and thick furs to ward off the mountain chill. A large window offered a breathtaking view of jagged peaks and valleys shrouded in perpetual mist, but the ornate lock on her door made one thing abundantly clear: this was still a prison, merely one with finer appointments. Sleep evaded her that first night. Every creak of ancient stone, every whisper of wind through the mountain fortress sent her heart racing. When dawn finally broke, she stood at her window watching as the first tentative rays of sunlight crept across the treacherous landscape below. The mountains surrounding the spire resembled teeth in the maw of some primordial beast. Nothing grew here except gnarled pines that clung desperately to rock faces, twisted by relentless winds into shapes of supplication. A soft knock announced the arrival of a servant, an elderly woman with downcast eyes, who silently laid out a simple but elegant dress of midnight blue. No servant's tunic here. She was to be dressed according to her new station, whatever that might be. The woman helped her bathe and dress, working with efficient movements that brooked no conversation. When finished, she gestured for Alara to follow. The onyx spire revealed itself in daylight as a marvel of ancient engineering and dark beauty. Corridors spiraled in patterns that seemed designed to disorient, branching into countless chambers and halls. Everywhere the black stone absorbed light, creating an atmosphere of permanent twilight even where torches blazed. Guards stood at strategic junctions, their obsidian armor making them appear as extensions of the fortress itself. The servant led her to a vast chamber dominated by a long table of black marble. Emperor Kirin sat at its head, surrounded by scrolls and maps, his face set in lines of concentration and pain. Even from the threshold, Alara could sense the waves of agony radiating from him. The shadowy veins she had glimpsed last night pulsed beneath the skin of his hands as he gripped a document with white knuckles. Marcus stood at his side, speaking in low tones. Both men looked up as she entered. For a moment, something like relief flickered across Kirin's severe features before his expression returned to its customary coldness. "Approach," he commanded, his voice taut with restrained suffering. Alara moved forward on legs that threatened to betray her. The vast chamber made her feel insignificant, a moth drawn to a flame that would surely consume her. "Your Majesty," she managed, attempting a curtsy that years of servitude had never taught her to perfect. Kirin dismissed the servant with a flick of his wrist. "You will attend me here during daylight hours," he stated without preamble. "You will speak only when spoken to. You will observe my meetings, but repeat nothing of what you hear." His eyes narrowed. "The punishment for betraying my confidence is death, not just for you, but for your entire family." The threat hung in the air between them. Alara swallowed hard, nodding her understanding. "Now come here." She approached his side, knowing what he required. Without waiting for further instruction, she reached for his hand. The contact sent the same jolt of energy through her system, the same awareness of his internal inferno. Concentrating, she channeled her gift toward him, imagining cool water flowing from her fingertips into the burning core of his pain. His reaction was immediate, a sharp intake of breath, followed by the slow relaxation of muscles held rigid for too long. The shadowy veins beneath his skin receded slightly, fading from stark black to a dull gray. For several minutes they remained thus connected, neither speaking, as she poured soothing calm into the maelstrom of his curse. Finally, he withdrew his hand. "Sit," he instructed, indicating a cushioned bench near his chair. "I have business to attend to." And so began her strange new routine. Alara spent her days in Kieran's study, observing as he managed the affairs of 5 kingdoms with ruthless efficiency. Counselors, generals, and mages came and went, each treated with the same cold authority. Several times daily, when the pain became too intense to bear, he would summon her with a glance. She would go to him, place her hand on his, and offer her silent, soothing gift. The moments were brief, impersonal, and charged with a strange intimacy that neither acknowledged. She was his living medicine, a tool to be used. Days stretched into weeks. Alara learned to navigate the complex power dynamics of the imperial court, where whispers followed her like persistent shadows. The emperor's pet, they called her, eyes averted but ears straining for any information about her purpose. Some believed she was his concubine, others a peculiar experiment. None guessed the truth. Marcus alone treated her with a gruff respect that bordered on kindness. He seemed to understand her importance to the emperor, though she doubted he knew the exact nature of her service. "The emperor sleeps now," he told her one night, after a particularly grueling day of diplomatic negotiations that had left Kieran visibly drained. "You've done well. He rarely managed 4 hours of rest before you came." The unexpected approval warmed her. "Has he always been—" She hesitated, unsure how to phrase her question without risking treason. "In pain?" Marcus finished, his scarred face softening slightly in the torchlight. "Since the coronation 10 years ago, it began the moment the crown touched his head." He studied her with his one good eye. "Whatever you're doing for him, girl, it's more than anyone has accomplished in a decade." She wanted to ask more, about the nature of the curse, about Kieran's life before it, but Marcus was already turning away. "Rest while you can," he advised. "Tomorrow brings a new challenge." That night, alone in her chambers, Alara found herself thinking of the Emperor not as a monster or a jailer, but as a man trapped in a waking nightmare. She had witnessed his suffering, felt it flow through her own veins during their brief contacts. How did one endure such torment and still rule an empire? What kind of strength did that require? Something shifted inside her. The fear that had dominated her first weeks in the spire began to transmute into something more complex, a reluctant admiration, perhaps, or the first seeds of compassion. As autumn deepened into winter, the spire grew even colder. Frigid winds howled through the mountain passes, and snow blanketed the jagged landscape. Within the fortress, life continued its rigorous pace. The emperor allowed no weakness, not from his subjects, and certainly not from himself. But as the weeks passed, something changed between them. Kieran began to speak to her. At first it was just commands. "Read to me," he ordered one evening, pushing a leather-bound volume toward her. She picked it up, a history of the ancient wolf clans, and began to read aloud in her low, steady voice. She discovered that her voice alone seemed to have a palliative effect on him. The tension would ease from his shoulders, the hard lines of his face softening as he listened. He never looked at her while she read, always staring into the fire or out the window at the snow-capped peaks. But she knew he was listening to every word. One night, after she had read for nearly 2 hours, he asked her a question. "Your father was General Alaric Moonshade." It wasn't truly a question, but she heard the inquiry behind it. Alara's hands tightened on the book. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You were there, the day of his execution." She closed the book, her throat suddenly tight. "I was." Kieran turned from the window to study her. In the firelight, his features seemed less harsh, more human. "You looked directly at me, a child surrounded by cowering adults, yet you alone met my eyes without fear." The memory surfaced with painful clarity, the execution square, the gleaming blade, her father's proud final words, and the young emperor watching from a black stallion, his face impassive, but his eyes had held something she couldn't name. "I remember," she whispered. Why? He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Why did you not fear me even then? She considered lying, offering some flattering explanation, but something in his gaze demanded truth. Because I saw your pain, she admitted. Even then, before I understood what it was, I saw that you were suffering. Silence stretched between them, taut with unspoken revelations. Your father was not a traitor, Kieran said finally, surprising her. He was a threat. He knew too much about the royal bloodline, about ancient magics better left forgotten. He turned back to the window. His execution was a necessity, not justice. The confession stunned her. She had spent years believing her family disgraced by treachery, only to discover that her father's death had been political expediency. Grief and anger warred within her breast. What did he know? She dared to ask. Kieran's shoulders stiffened. Enough, he replied, his voice suddenly cold again. You are dismissed for the night. She rose, recognizing the abrupt shift in his mood. Their moment of connection had passed. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Elara. It was the first time he had used her name. Your father died with honor. Remember that. She left without another word, her mind reeling with new questions about her family's fate and the secrets that had condemned them. The next day brought a new development. Kieran summoned her to a council meeting, not to stand silent in the background, but to sit at the table alongside his advisors. The shock on their faces at her elevated position was poorly disguised. My lords, Kieran addressed the assembled men, his voice carrying the weight of imperial decree. Elara Moonshade will attend all strategic councils henceforth. She has my complete confidence. The statement sent ripples of surprise and suspicion through the gathering. Elara kept her expression carefully neutral, though her heart raced at this unexpected promotion. Why would he place her in such a visible position? The reason became clear as the meeting progressed. Twice, when the pain of his curse flared particularly fierce, she was able to subtly touch his hand beneath the table, providing relief without drawing attention. His strategy was elegant in its simplicity. By giving her an official place at his side, he enabled her to assist him without revealing his weakness. The council discussed border disputes, grain reserves for the coming winter, and reports of unrest in the northern territories. Kieran listened more than he spoke, his mind clearly weighing each problem against larger strategic concerns. Elara found herself impressed by his command of details, his understanding of complex political dynamics. This was not a tyrant ruling by brute force alone, but a formidable intellect maintaining control of a fragile alliance of former enemies. The realization added another layer to her evolving perception of the Emperor. As winter deepened, blizzards isolated the spire for days at a time. During one such storm, Elara was returning from the fortress library, where she had been granted limited access, when she heard crying. Following the sound, she discovered a small chamber where several children huddled around a meager fire. They were the offspring of castle servants, she realized, left to entertain themselves while their parents worked. The youngest, a girl of perhaps 5 years, sobbed quietly in a corner, terrified by the howling winds that made the ancient stones tremble. Without hesitation, Elara entered and sat beside her. "Would you like to hear a story?" she asked gently. The child nodded, tears still tracking down her round cheeks. The other children gathered closer, eager for distraction from the storm. Elara began a tale her grandmother had told her, about a brave wolf separated from its pack during a great blizzard. As she spoke, her natural gift emerged. The children grew calm, their fears receding as they lost themselves in the story's adventure. Even the howling wind seemed to diminish, as if nature itself paused to listen. She was so engrossed in her storytelling that she didn't notice the tall figure in the doorway until she finished the tale. The children's wide-eyed stares alerted her to the Emperor's presence. She rose quickly, heart pounding. "Your Majesty," she stammered, uncertain whether she had somehow transgressed. Kieran regarded the scene with an unreadable expression. The children had pressed themselves against the walls, terror evident in their rigid postures. "Continue," he said simply, his deep voice echoing in the small chamber. Then, to her utter astonishment, he lowered himself onto a bench near the door. I would hear the end of this brave wolf's journey. Stunned, Elara resumed her seat. The children remained frozen until she began speaking again, her voice gradually restoring the spell of the story. She told of how the lost wolf discovered a hidden valley where ancient wolf spirits dwelled, learning wisdom that would eventually save its pack from a terrible threat. Throughout her tale, she was acutely aware of Kieran watching her, his gray eyes intent. When she finished, the children sighed with satisfaction, their earlier fears forgotten. "Your Majesty," a small boy ventured, bolder than his companions, "do you know any stories about wolves?" The room went still. Asking anything of the Emperor, much less something so personal, was unthinkable. Elara held her breath, expecting a harsh rebuke. Instead, after a long pause, Kieran spoke. "I know one," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. About the first emperor of the United Kingdoms and how he made a pact with the mountain itself. For the next half hour, Kieran wove a tale of ancient magic and sacrifice, of a warrior who gave up his mortal life to become one with the spirit of the mountains, ensuring protection for his people for generations to come. His storytelling was sparse, lacking Elara's natural warmth, but it possessed a compelling gravity that held the children spellbound. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then the youngest girl asked, with innocent curiosity, "Are you lonely up here in the mountain, Emperor?" Elara's breath caught. Even the other children sensed the transgression, eyes widening in alarm. Kieran studied the child for a long moment. "Yes," he answered finally, the single word falling like a stone into still water. Then he rose. "Return to your chambers, Elara. The storm worsens." He departed without another word, leaving her to wonder at this glimpse of vulnerability, this momentary lowering of his formidable defenses. Later that night, unable to sleep, she stood at her window watching the blizzard rage against the mountainside. A soft knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Kieran himself standing in the corridor, no guards in sight. "Your Majesty," she gasped, instinctively stepping back. He entered her chamber like a shadow, his presence instantly filling the space. Without preamble, he spoke. "My mother told stories before she died. She had the same gift you possess, the ability to calm with words." Elara remained silent, sensing the rarity of this personal revelation. "I was 10 when the fever took her," he continued, moving to stand by her window. "My father had already fallen in battle. I became heir to a fractured kingdom, raised by generals and advisors who saw only a weapon to be forged." His profile was stark against the night sky, pride and pain etched in equal measure. "No one told me stories after that." The confession hung between them, unexpected and profound. Elara felt something shift in her understanding of this complex man, no longer just the fearsome Shadow King, but a child orphaned young, shaped by loss and duty into something formidable and solitary. "The children asked me after you left," she said carefully, "if you were truly made of shadows, as the stories claim." A bitter smile touched his lips. "And what did you tell them?" "That even shadows need light to exist." He turned to her then, his eyes searching her face as if seeing her anew. "You are a strange creature, Elara Moonshade. Wolfless, yet stronger than many alpha warriors I have known." "Not strong," she corrected gently. "Just different." "Different," he echoed, the words seeming to hold special significance. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Show me." She understood without further explanation. Reaching for his hand, she took it between both of hers. The connection flared instantly, the now familiar current of energy, the sense of his internal fire. But this time, instead of merely soothing, she tried to understand. She focused on the pattern of the pain, the way it pulsed and flowed through him like a living entity. The curse was ancient, she realized with sudden clarity. It had sunk roots deep into his being, becoming entwined with his very life force. Yet it was not truly part of him. It was a parasite, feeding on his strength, growing stronger as he did. "It's alive," she whispered, eyes wide with the discovery. "Your curse, it's a conscious thing." Kieran's face tightened. "Yes, a sentient punishment, designed to grow with the bearer. The stronger I become, the more it consumes." Who would create such a thing? An enemy believed long vanquished. His free hand clenched into a fist. "My ancestors destroyed an ancient clan of wolf spirits, beings of immense magical power. Their dying queen laid this curse upon the royal bloodline, condemning each ruler to suffer increasingly as they wielded greater power." Alara recalled the stories her grandmother had told, legends of spirit wolves with silver fur who could heal or harm with a touch, tales she had always assumed were mere fantasy. "The spirit wolf clan," she breathed. "They were real?" Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or suspicion. "How do you know that name? Few outside the royal archives have heard it." "My grandmother's stories. She spoke of silver wolves who walked in two forms, whose magic came from the moon itself." Kieran's grip on her hand tightened. "Your grandmother. From which bloodline?" "My father's mother. She died before—" She trailed off, unwilling to mention the execution again. "Before I killed your father," he finished flatly. "What was her name?" "Lyria. Lyria Moonshade." The name seemed to strike him like a physical blow. He dropped her hand and stepped back, his expression suddenly guarded. "You will speak of this to no one," he commanded, his voice returning to its imperial coldness. "These are matters of state security." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Tomorrow, you will attend me in the ancient library. There are texts you should see." With that cryptic statement, he departed, leaving Alara confused and unsettled. What significance did her grandmother's name hold? What connection existed between her family and the curse that plagued the emperor? Sleep eluded her that night, her dreams, when they came, filled with silver wolves running beneath a full moon, calling to her in voices that seemed hauntingly familiar. The next morning, Marcus appeared at her door earlier than usual. "The Emperor awaits in the lower library," he informed her. "Few are granted access to these archives. Consider it an honor." He led her deeper into the spire than she had yet ventured, down spiraling stairs carved directly into the mountain's heart. The air grew heavier, tinged with the scent of ancient parchment and forgotten secrets. Finally, they reached a vast chamber lined with shelves that disappeared into shadow. No windows existed this deep in the mountain. The only light came from enchanted crystals that glowed with a soft blue radiance. Kieran stood before a massive stone table covered with unfurled scrolls and open tomes. He looked up as they entered, his expression grave. "Leave us," he commanded Marcus, who bowed and departed without question. Alara approached the table cautiously. The documents laid out before her were written in a script she couldn't decipher, flowing characters that seemed to shimmer and move when viewed directly. "Moon script," Kieran explained, noting her fascination. "The written language of the Spirit Wolf clan. Few now living can read it." "Can you?" she asked. "Partially. It was part of my education as heir." He indicated a particular scroll, its edges crumbling with age. "This chronicles the war between my ancestor, Emperor Valen, and the spirit wolves. It speaks of their extinction, and the curse placed upon our line with their final breath." Alara studied the document, tracing the elegant script with her fingertip. Though she couldn't read the words, something about them felt strangely familiar, as if they whispered at the edges of her consciousness. "Why show me this?" she questioned. Kieran's eyes narrowed, studying her with calculated intensity. "Because of what you did last night. You sensed the nature of the curse, something no healer or mage has accomplished in a decade. Because your grandmother bore the name Lyria, which appears in these texts as a high priestess of the Spirit Wolf clan who was thought to have perished in the final battle." He leaned forward, his palms flat against the ancient stone. "And because I begin to suspect, Alara Moonshade, that you are not Wolfless at all. You are something else entirely." The accusation, for it felt like one, stole her breath. That's impossible. I've never shifted, never felt the presence of a wolf spirit. I've been tested by pack elders, subjected to every ritual and examination. There is nothing inside me. Perhaps not a traditional wolf, he conceded. But your ability to soothe my curse, your connection to these ancient texts, your grandmother's name, these are not coincidences. Elara shook her head, unwilling to accept the implication. All her life she had been defined by her lack, by the wolf-shaped emptiness within her. To consider another possibility was too disorienting, too contradictory to her entire understanding of herself. Kieran must have sensed her resistance. His approach softened. There is one who might provide answers, the royal healer, Lady Ravenna. She has studied the curse since my coronation and has knowledge of ancient bloodlines that even I do not possess. He straightened, decision made. She returns from the Eastern Territories tomorrow. Until then, we will continue as before. But speak of this to no one, Elara. If what I suspect is true, there are those who would consider your very existence a threat to the Empire. The warning chilled her. She had come to the spire as a tool for the Emperor's comfort. Now she stood at the center of a mystery that apparently carried political implications she couldn't begin to comprehend. As Winter's grip tightened around the onyx spire, another development arose to complicate Elara's already precarious position. Word arrived via Imperial messenger that General Alaric, the Emperor's uncle and commander of the Northern Legion, was journeying to the spire for the winter court session. The news sent a ripple of tension through the fortress. Even the guards, normally stoic and silent, exchanged uneasy glances at the announcement. The general has not visited the spire in 5 years, Marcus explained when Elara questioned him. His relationship with the Emperor is complex. He disapproves of His Majesty? She ventured. Marcus's scarred face twisted in what might have been a smile. The general believes that strength is the only virtue, and that any perceived weakness should be purged with fire. He considered the Emperor's father a weak fool, and has made no secret of his belief that the son follows in those footsteps. The description sent a chill through Elara. She could imagine all too clearly how such a man would view her presence at the Emperor's side. When she entered Kieran's study that evening, she found him standing at the window, tension evident in every line of his body. "Your uncle comes," she said softly, announcing her presence. He didn't turn. "Yes, to assess my fitness to rule, though he would never phrase it so directly." His voice held a cold fury. "He circles like a vulture, waiting for me to falter." Elara moved to stand beside him, gazing out at the snow-capped peaks bathed in moonlight. "Because of the curse?" "Because I unified the kingdoms through alliance as well as conquest. Because I execute only when necessary, not as sport. Because I seek to build something lasting, rather than merely satisfying the bloodlust of warriors." His fist clenched at his side. "My uncle believes that compassion is weakness, and weakness is death." She studied his profile, strong and unyielding in the silver light. "And what do you believe, Your Majesty?" He turned to her then, his gray eyes reflecting the cold fire of stars. "I believe that true strength lies in endurance, in bearing pain without becoming monstrous, in building rather than merely destroying." Something vulnerable flickered in his gaze. "At least, that is what I have tried to believe through 10 years of unrelenting torment." The quiet confession moved her deeply. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. The familiar connections sparked between them, but this time it felt different. Not merely the transfer of her soothing calm to his pain, but a genuine moment of human contact between two souls united by understanding. "He will see me as your weakness," she whispered, giving voice to her fear. Kieran's fingers tightened around hers. "Then he is a greater fool than I imagined." For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them, joined by touch and something deeper neither could yet name. Then Kieran released her hand and stepped back, his expression shifting to one of imperial resolve. "When Alaric arrives, you will remain at my side as before. Show no fear, no hesitation. If he senses either, he will exploit it without mercy." Elara nodded, though dread pooled in her stomach. She had survived years of being invisible, insignificant. Now she would face a man who had made an art of destroying those he deemed unworthy. General Alaric arrived with the first heavy snow of deep winter, sweeping into the onyx spire with a retinue of grim-faced warriors and an aura of arrogant authority. He was a large man built like a battering ram, with a thick gray beard and eyes as cold and hard as river stones. Where Kieran's power was a tightly controlled storm, Alaric's was a blunt, brutal force, wielded without finesse or restraint. He greeted his nephew in the great hall with a perfunctory bow that was more challenge than respect. "Your Majesty," he boomed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You look strained. The burdens of the crown weigh heavily, I see." "The crown is no heavier than it has ever been, Uncle," Kieran replied, his voice a dangerous level calm. He stood beside his throne, a pillar of black against the gray stone, with Alara standing a few paces behind him, as she always did now. Alaric's cold eyes slid past Kieran and landed on Alara. A look of profound disgust twisted his features. He sniffed the air disdainfully. "What is this? The stench of the Wolfless pollutes your very throne room. Have you taken to keeping pets now, nephew?" Alara flinched as if struck. The familiar shame washed over her, hot and suffocating. All the Emperor's guards and servants stared at her, their faces reflecting Alaric's contempt. Before she could shrink away, Kieran took a deliberate step to the side, partially shielding her with his body. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but to Alara it felt like a shield had been raised. "This is Alara Moonshade," Kieran said, his voice dropping to a lethal quiet. "She is under my personal protection. You will show her the respect due to any member of my court, or you will find your welcome here has expired." Alaric's eyebrows shot up in feigned surprise, though a cruel smirk played on his lips. "Protection for a broken thing like that? What use could she possibly be to a king?" His gaze grew calculating. "Unless the rumors of your affliction have more truth to them than I imagined. Perhaps you require a living crutch." The barb hit its mark. Alara felt Kieran tense beside her, a wave of fury and pain rolling off him in palpable waves. The curse always flared with strong emotion. She saw his hand clench into a fist at his side, the knuckles white with strain. Instinctively she reached out. Under cover of her own simple dress, her fingers brushed against the back of his hand. The contact was brief, a ghost of a touch, but it was enough. She pushed a wave of calm into him, a silent plea to hold on, to not let this brute provoke him. He drew a sharp, controlled breath, and the killing rage in his eyes subsided to a cold, banked fire. The exchange lasted only seconds, unnoticed by anyone but them. But Alaric, ever watchful, saw the minute shift in Kieran's demeanor. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of cunning calculation within them. He didn't know what he had just witnessed, but he knew it was significant. He had found a chink in his nephew's armor, and her name was Alara Moonshade. The days that followed Alaric's arrival transformed the onyx spire into a battlefield of subtle hostilities and calculated moves. The general made no secret of his disdain for Alara, referring to her as the Wolfless stray whenever she was in earshot. His warriors followed his example, their contemptuous glances and whispered mockery creating an atmosphere of perpetual tension. Kieran bore it with icy composure, though Alara could feel the toll it was taking on him. The curse flared more frequently, stirred by his suppressed rage and the constant stress of maintaining control in his uncle's presence. He required her touch more often, their sessions growing longer as she fought to contain the spreading darkness beneath his skin. During council meetings, Alaric challenged Kieran's decisions with barely concealed insolence. He questioned military strategies, suggested harsher punishments for minor infractions, and subtly spread dissent among visiting lords by hinting at the emperor's softening resolve. "The tribes beyond the northern wastes grow bold," Alaric announced during one particularly tense council session. "My scouts report they raid our border settlements with increasing frequency. They sense weakness in our leadership." Kieran's expression remained impassive, though Alara detected the slight tightening of his jaw. "Your scouts exaggerate. The northern tribes suffered heavy losses during last year's campaign. They have neither the numbers nor resources for a significant threat. Perhaps your intelligence is outdated, Alaric countered with false deference. Or perhaps you are too distracted to properly assess the danger. His eyes flickered meaningfully toward Alara. My assessment is based on facts, not fear-mongering, Kieran replied coldly. I will not waste Imperial resources chasing shadows in the north when our eastern borders require attention. The exchange was typical of their interactions, Alaric pushing for aggressive action, Kieran insisting on strategic restraint. Beneath the surface, however, a deeper battle was being waged. Alaric was systematically testing his nephew's control, searching for the moment when the curse would overwhelm him. In private, Kieran's frustration boiled over. He is trying to bait me into a public display of weakness, he growled one evening, pacing before the fire in his study. His arm was bothering him badly, the shadow veins a dark web reaching past his elbow toward his heart. Alara sat watching him, her own heart aching at his struggle. He wants you to lose control, she said softly. If the court were to see you in the grip of the curse, Alaric would have all the support he needs to challenge my rule, Kieran finished grimly. The laws of succession are clear. If a ruler is deemed physically unfit to lead, the next strongest bloodline member may contest the throne through trial by combat. The implication was clear. Alaric wanted to provoke Kieran into a public episode severe enough to justify a challenge Kieran might not survive in his compromised state. You are not unfit to rule, Alara said with quiet vehemence. Your curse is a burden, not a weakness. You have led the 5 kingdoms with more wisdom than your uncle could comprehend. Kieran gave a short, bitter laugh. You are the only person in this world who would say that. He came to her, sinking to one knee before her chair in a shocking display of vulnerability from an emperor. He took her hand, not for the relief it offered, but simply to hold it. His thumb stroked the back of her palm in an absent gesture that seemed to soothe him almost as much as her gift. Why are you not afraid of me, Alara? The question hung between them, fragile and profound. I was, she admitted, but it's hard to fear someone when you've felt their pain. His storm-gray eyes searched hers, looking for falsehood, for pity, for the revulsion he expected. He found none. He saw only a deep, quiet empathy that mirrored the calm she pushed into his tortured soul. A fragile, unspoken bond had been growing between them in the silent hours of his study, forged in shared solitude and secret suffering. It was no longer just a transaction. She was no longer merely his medicine. She had become essential to him in ways neither had anticipated. The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Marcus entered, his expression grave. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. Lady Ravenna has arrived from the eastern provinces. Kieran rose swiftly, his imperial mask sliding back into place. Bring her to me at once. Alara felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. The royal healer, the woman who might have answers about her mysterious connection to the Spirit Wolf clan. Lady Ravenna entered like a winter wind, crisp, bracing, and commanding immediate attention. She was older than Alara had expected, with silver hair pulled into a severe knot and piercing amber eyes that missed nothing. She wore robes of midnight blue embroidered with ancient symbols and carried herself with the quiet authority of one who has seen centuries rather than decades. She bowed to Kieran with practiced grace. Your Majesty, I came as soon as your summons reached me. Lady Ravenna. Kieran inclined his head in respect that seemed unusually genuine. Your journey was safe? Safe enough, though your uncle's warriors watched the eastern roads with suspicious diligence. Her gaze shifted to Alara, assessing her with unnerving intensity. This is the girl? Kieran nodded. Alara Moonshade, daughter of General Alaric Moonshade. Ravenna circled Alara slowly, studying her from every angle. Interesting. Very interesting. She reached out suddenly, grasping Alara's wrist with surprising strength. Her touch sent a jolt through Alara's system. Not painful, but unsettling, as if something inside her responded to the healer's probing. What do you sense? Kieran demanded, watching the exchange closely. Potential, Ravenna replied cryptically. She released Alara's wrist and turned to the Emperor. "We must speak privately, Your Majesty, in the ancient library, where certain ears cannot listen at doors." Kieran frowned but nodded. "Marcus, ensure we are not disturbed. Alara, come with us." The ancient library felt different in Lady Ravenna's presence. The enchanted crystals glowed more brightly, and the air seemed charged with expectation. The healer moved among the shelves with familiar ease, selecting scrolls and tomes with swift precision. "I have studied your curse since the day it manifested," she said without preamble, spreading ancient documents across the stone table. 10 years searching for any mention of a counterspell, a weakness, anything that might offer relief. She glanced at Alara. "And now you bring me this girl, who apparently soothes the unsoothable." "Can you explain it?" Kieran asked. Ravenna's amber eyes narrowed. "Perhaps, but first, tell me exactly what happens when she touches you." Kieran described the sensation, the initial jolt, the gradual easing of pain, the temporary retreat of the shadow veins beneath his skin. Alara added her perspective, the sense of his internal fire, the feeling of offering cooling water to a parched desert. The healer listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a small journal. When they finished, she nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "Show me," she commanded. Without hesitation, Alara reached for Kieran's hand. The now familiar connection established itself, her gift flowing into him like a gentle stream. Ravenna watched with narrowed eyes, her head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. "Extraordinary," she murmured. "It's not just alleviating symptoms. She's actually pushing back the curse itself." She moved closer, placing her own weathered hand over their joined ones. "The resonance is unmistakable." "Resonance?" Alara questioned. "Magical harmony," Ravenna explained, "like calls to like. Your energy and the curse's energy are opposite sides of the same coin, one constructive, one destructive, but fundamentally linked." She withdrew her hand, her expression contemplative. "You said your grandmother was named Lyria?" Alara nodded, a shiver running down her spine at the intensity of the healer's gaze. Ravenna turned to Kieran. "There's something you need to see." She moved to a locked cabinet at the far end of the library, removing an ancient key from around her neck. From within, she extracted a small wooden box carved with lunar symbols. Opening it carefully, she revealed a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. "This belonged to the last high priestess of the Spirit Wolf clan," she explained, holding it up so the enchanted light caught its surface. "Her name was Lyria Moonshadow. She was thought to have perished in the final battle against your ancestor, Emperor Valen." Alara's breath caught. "Moonshadow, not Moonshade." "Names change over time, especially when one wishes to hide," Ravenna said pointedly. "Your family name was altered, I suspect, to conceal your lineage." "Are you saying Alara is descended from this priestess?" Kieran demanded, his expression tense. "I believe so. More specifically, I believe Lyria Moonshadow survived the purge of her clan and went into hiding among the regular wolf packs, passing herself off as a common shifter. She would have suppressed her true nature, living as an ordinary wolf, and passed the secret of her identity down through generations of daughters." "But I have no wolf," Alara protested. "I've never shifted, never felt anything inside me." Ravenna's smile held ancient knowledge. "You have no ordinary wolf, child. What you carry is far older and rarer. The spirit wolves were not shifters as we understand them today. They were beings of pure spiritual energy who could manifest physical forms. Their power came not from brute strength, but from their connection to the primordial forces of balance and healing." She gestured to the pendant. "This contains a drop of Lyria Moonshadow's essence, a safeguard created in case her line should ever need to reclaim its heritage." She held it out to Alara. "Take it." Hesitantly, Alara reached for the pendant. The moment her fingers touched the cool silver, a pulse of energy shot through her body. Images flashed before her eyes, a forest bathed in moonlight, silver wolves running in formation, a woman with Alara's eyes raising her hands toward a full moon. She gasped, nearly dropping the pendant. "What did you see?" Ravenna asked sharply. "Fragments. Memories that aren't mine," Alara whispered. "A forest, wolves, a woman performing some kind of ritual." "Ancestral memory," Ravenna nodded, satisfied. "Your blood remembers what your mind does not." Kieran watched the exchange with growing tension. If what you say is true, if Alara is indeed descended from the Spirit Wolf clan, then her very existence could be seen as a threat to the Empire. The clan's surviving members, if any exist, would have every reason to use her against the Imperial bloodline. Or perhaps, Ravenna countered, she represents a chance to heal an ancient wound. The curse that afflicts you was born of hatred and vengeance. Perhaps its cure lies in reconciliation. Alara looked between them, struggling to absorb the implications. Her entire identity had been built around her lack, her emptiness. Now she was being told that she harbored something ancient and powerful, that her perceived weakness might actually be her greatest strength. "There's more," Ravenna continued, her tone growing grave. "The curse is accelerating. I can see it clearly now that I've observed its reaction to Alara. It senses her presence as a threat and is strengthening its hold on you, Your Majesty." Kieran's face hardened. "How long?" "Without intervention? A year, perhaps less. The shadow veins will reach your heart, and when they do—" She left the sentence unfinished, its conclusion too terrible to voice aloud. "And with intervention?" he pressed. Ravenna's gaze shifted to Alara. "That depends on her. If she is indeed who I believe her to be, she may possess the ability to not just soothe the curse, but to break it entirely." "How?" Alara asked, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," the healer admitted. "The knowledge died with the Spirit Wolf clan. We would need to awaken your dormant abilities, help you access the ancestral wisdom locked within your blood." She looked thoughtful. "The pendant may help. Wear it close to your heart. Let it reacquaint you with your true nature." Ravenna gathered her scrolls, her expression solemn. "I must research further. There are texts in the eastern sanctuaries that may offer guidance. In the meantime, Your Majesty, avoid emotional extremes. Anger, fear, even joy, they all strengthen the curse's grip." After the healer departed, Alara and Kieran remained in the library, the silence between them heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Alara voiced the question that hung in the air. "If I am what she believes, a descendant of those your ancestors destroyed, does that make me your enemy?" Kieran's expression was unreadable in the crystal light. "It makes you a paradox, Alara Moonshade. The blood of my enemy flows in your veins, yet you alone have brought me peace." His voice softened. "I find I cannot see you as anything but an ally, perhaps even a friend." The word friend hung between them, simple yet profound. An emperor had no friends, only subjects and enemies. This admission was as significant as any imperial decree. "I should go," Alara said, suddenly aware of the intimate space they occupied, the dangerous knowledge they now shared. "It's late." Kieran nodded, though reluctance shadowed his eyes. "Wear the pendant as Ravenna suggested. Keep it hidden. If Alaric were to learn of your heritage—" The warning needed no completion. Alaric would see her as a threat to be eliminated, or worse, a weapon to be controlled. That night, alone in her chambers, Alara placed the silver pendant around her neck. It rested cool against her skin, a crescent moon nestled in the hollow of her throat. She fell asleep with her fingers curled around it, her dreams filled with silver wolves running beneath a full moon, calling to her in a language that seemed both foreign and hauntingly familiar. The dreams continued in the nights that followed, each more vivid than the last. She ran through ancient forests, feeling the earth beneath paws she'd never possessed. She stood in stone circles as moonlight bathed her in silver radiance. She heard voices chanting in a language she couldn't understand, but somehow knew was her birthright. She began to change in subtle ways. Her senses sharpened. Scents became more distinct, sounds more clear. She found herself instinctively aware of the phases of the moon, her energy waxing and waning with its cycles. Most significantly, her gift grew stronger. When she touched Kieran, the relief she provided lasted longer, penetrated deeper. Ravenna, who had taken up temporary residence in the spire, observed these changes with knowing eyes. "Your dormant abilities are awakening," she explained during a private consultation in her makeshift laboratory. "The pendant is reactivating what has long been suppressed in your bloodline." "But I still cannot shift," Alara pointed out. "I still have no wolf." "Your power doesn't manifest that way," Ravenna corrected. "You won't shift into a physical wolf." The spirit wolf's abilities were ethereal, healing, soothing, connecting with the spiritual essence of others. That's why your gift affects the Emperor's curse. You're not just easing his pain, you're directly countering the magical energy that sustains it. The revelation was both thrilling and terrifying. Alara had spent her life believing herself deficient, incomplete. The possibility that she might actually possess rare abilities rather than suffer from their absence was difficult to reconcile with her sense of self. Even more unsettling was the growing awareness of her feelings toward Kieran. What had begun as fear, then evolved into reluctant respect, had blossomed into something deeper and more complex. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, noting the rare moments when his guard lowered, when a hint of the man beneath the imperial mask emerged. She saw his dedication to his people, his strategic mind, his capacity for justice tempered with mercy. She witnessed his daily battle against the curse, the strength it took to rule 5 kingdoms while enduring constant agony. Most of all, she recognized the profound loneliness that mirrored her own, a solitude born not of circumstance, but of fundamental difference from those around them. These dangerous thoughts preoccupied her as she made her way to Kieran's study one evening. The spire was unusually quiet, most of the court having retired early in preparation for the winter solstice celebration the following day. She found the study empty, which was unusual. Kieran was habitually punctual, often arriving before her. Concerned, she was about to search for him when she heard voices from a nearby corridor. Kieran and Alaric, their tones heated. "Your leadership grows increasingly questionable." Alaric's voice carried clearly, sharp with contempt. "First, you refuse to crush the northern tribes, then you reject advantageous marriage alliances, and now you surround yourself with weaklings and oddities." "My decisions are based on what benefits the Empire, not what satisfies bloodlust," Kieran replied coldly. "The northern campaign you propose would cost thousands of lives for minimal strategic gain. As for marriage alliances, I will choose a mate when it serves the imperial interest, not to placate traditionalists." "And the Wolfless girl?" Alaric's voice dropped, becoming dangerous. "What imperial interest does she serve, nephew? Or is her service more personal?" Alara froze, heart pounding as she pressed against the wall, hidden in shadow. "Alara Moonshade is under my protection," Kieran stated flatly. "Her role in my court is not your concern." A harsh laugh. "My spies report that she spends hours alone with you daily, that you touch frequently, that your condition seems to improve in her presence." A heavy pause. "She has some power over your curse, doesn't she? You've become dependent on a weakling to maintain your facade of strength." The accusation hung in the air, deadly in its accuracy. "Your spies overstep." Kieran's voice had become dangerously soft. "Remember to whom you speak, uncle." "I speak to a compromised emperor," Alaric retorted. "One who risks the Empire's future by relying on a girl who should have been culled at birth for her deficiency. The Council will be most interested to learn of this arrangement." "Threaten me again," Kieran said, each word precise and cutting, "and you will discover that my father's tolerance was not inherited." Heavy footsteps signaled Alaric's departure, followed by a sound that chilled Alara's blood, a muffled groan of pain from Kieran. She rushed around the corner to find him leaning against the wall, his face contorted in agony, the shadow veins visibly crawling up his neck. "Kieran!" She forgot protocol in her alarm, using his name without title for the first time. His eyes found hers, glazed with pain. "Alara," he managed, before his knees buckled. She caught him as he fell, struggling under his weight. Using all her strength, she helped him to a nearby chamber, a small meeting room, mercifully empty. She lowered him into a chair, her hands immediately finding his, pouring her gift into him with desperate intensity. "The curse flares with emotion," she murmured, recalling Ravenna's warning. "Your confrontation with Alaric—" "He knows," Kieran gasped, the shadow veins pulsing beneath his skin. "He suspects your importance. He will use it against me." "Let him try," she said with unexpected fierceness. Her gift flowed stronger than ever, fueled by protective instinct. The pendant at her throat grew warm, almost hot, as she focused on pushing back the darkness ravaging him. Something new happened. Where before her gift had merely soothed the pain, now it seemed to actively repel the shadow veins. They retreated visibly, slithering back down his neck and under his collar. Kieran's breathing eased, his rigid posture relaxing as relief washed over him. "How did you do that?" he asked when he could speak again, wonder replacing pain in his eyes. Alara shook her head, equally surprised. "I don't know. It just happened." She touched the pendant. "Perhaps Ravenna is right. Perhaps I'm changing." Kieran studied her face with new intensity. "Alaric will move quickly now. He'll try to separate us, to deprive me of your assistance." "I won't let that happen," she promised, still holding his hands in hers. His expression softened, vulnerability showing through imperial reserve. "Why do you care, Alara? I took you from your home, made you a prisoner in all but name. I executed your father." Pain of a different kind shadowed his eyes. "By all rights, you should hope for my downfall." The question pierced her defenses. Why did she care? Because she had seen the man beneath the crown? Because she understood his suffering as no one else could? Or was it something deeper, more primal, a connection that transcended their complicated history? "Because you are more than your crown," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "And I am more than my father's daughter. We are not defined by the roles fate assigned us." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Kieran's gaze held hers, searching for doubt or deception and finding none. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand to her cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses of a warrior. "In another life," he murmured, "without curses or crowns or ancient hatreds." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The unspoken possibility shimmered between them, a world where they were simply a man and a woman, free to follow their hearts without the weight of empire and history on their shoulders. The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of footsteps. Kieran withdrew his hand, imperial composure sliding back into place, though something new lingered in his eyes. "The winter solstice celebration tomorrow," he said, his voice regaining its customary strength. "Alaric will make his move then, when the entire court is gathered. We must be prepared." Alara nodded, understanding the shift from personal to strategic concerns. "What would you have me do?" "Stay close to me. Wear the pendant beneath your robes, and be ready for anything." The warning followed her back to her chambers, where sleep came fitfully despite her exhaustion. Her dreams were fragmented, urgent, silver wolves running not in freedom, but in desperation, fleeing some nameless terror. A woman's voice called to her through the dreamscape. "Remember who you are. Remember what was lost. Only through unity can balance be restored." She woke at dawn with the pendant burning against her skin and an inexplicable certainty that today would change everything. The winter solstice celebration transformed the normally austere onyx spire. Ancient traditions required acknowledging the longest night of the year with appropriate ceremony. The great hall blazed with hundreds of torches and candles. Evergreen boughs and silver ribbons adorned the black stone walls. Guards wore ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness, and nobles displayed their finest winter furs and jewels. Alara was provided a gown of deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver threads that caught the light like stars. Lady Ravenna helped her prepare, weaving small white flowers into her dark hair. "The curse will be strongest tonight," the healer warned as she worked. "The winter solstice marks the pinnacle of darkness before light returns. Ancient magics gain power on such nights." She adjusted the pendant, ensuring it lay hidden beneath Alara's high collar. "Keep this close. You may need its strength before the night ends." The celebration began with traditional displays of martial prowess. Warriors demonstrated their skills in stylized combat, each movement a dance of controlled violence. Kieran presided from his obsidian throne, resplendent in formal black leathers, embellished with silver wolf emblems. Elara stood at his right hand, a position of honor that drew curious and hostile glances in equal measure. Alaric watched the proceedings with poorly concealed contempt, his massive frame dominating the gathering of high-ranking officers. Repeatedly, his cold gaze fixed on Elara, calculating and predatory. As the night progressed, Kieran's condition deteriorated subtly. Only Elara, attuned to his suffering, noticed the increasing tension in his jaw, the occasional spasm of his hand as he gripped the armrest of his throne. The curse was gaining strength, feeding on the solstice energy. During a brief lull in the festivities, Kieran leaned slightly toward her. "It worsens," he murmured, his voice tight with controlled pain. Ravenna was right about the solstice. Elara wanted nothing more than to take his hand, to ease his suffering, but they were surrounded by watchful eyes. Any display of her gift would confirm Alaric's suspicions. She could only stand helplessly as the shadow veins crept visibly up Kieran's neck, partially hidden by his high collar, but unmistakable to anyone standing close. The ceremonial feast began, with traditional dishes served in a specific order to honor ancient wolf customs. Wine flowed freely, tongues loosened, and the atmosphere grew increasingly raucous. Alaric rose to offer a toast, his voice carrying over the din. "To the Emperor!" he shouted, goblet raised high. His eyes gleamed with malicious intent. "A king so compassionate, he elevates the lowest of the low, a testament to his gentle heart." His gaze locked on Elara, who was standing in her usual place behind Kieran's chair. "In fact," he continued, voice dripping with sarcasm, "I believe a demonstration is in order. Let us see the worth of the Emperor's new favorite." Before anyone could react, Alaric grabbed a burning log from a nearby brazier and hurled it. It wasn't aimed at the king, but at the heavy tapestries behind the throne. They caught fire instantly, flames roaring up the ancient fabric. Panic erupted as guards rushed to contain the fire. But it was a diversion. As attention focused on the flames, one of Alaric's personal warriors, a brute of a man, lunged from the crowd. He wasn't heading for Kieran. He was heading for Elara, a long, wicked-looking dagger in his hand. It was an assassination attempt disguised as chaos. Alaric's plan was clear: eliminate the Emperor's crutch and watch him crumble when deprived of her mysterious support. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing as the assassin closed the distance. Elara was frozen, her mind unable to process the glint of steel and the murderous intent in the warrior's eyes. Shouts erupted around her, but they sounded distant, as if coming from underwater. Kieran moved. He didn't hesitate, didn't calculate. He reacted with pure primal instinct. With a roar that was more beast than man, he launched himself from his throne, not toward the assassin, but in front of Elara. He became a living shield, his body covering hers completely. The dagger meant for her heart plunged deep into Kieran's side. A collective gasp sucked the air from the hall. Kieran staggered, a choked cry of agony torn from his throat. It wasn't just the pain of the blade. The steel was coated with something dark and viscous, a poison. Elara felt it through her own heightened senses, a venom specifically designed to aggravate his curse. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The shadowy veins on his skin exploded into view. No longer confined to his arm or neck, they crawled across his face like grasping tendrils of living darkness. His body began to convulse, his control shattering completely. The oppressive aura of pain he normally kept leashed erupted from him, a psychic shockwave that sent nearby lords stumbling back, clutching their heads. "Behold your king!" Alaric bellowed over the chaos, his face triumphant. "A monster, a cursed beast, unfit to rule. He is weak, dependent on a wolfless wretch to keep his own demons at bay." Marcus and the royal guards were instantly upon Alaric and his men, the clash of steel ringing through the hall. But Elara saw none of it. Her world had narrowed to the man collapsing before her. Kieran fell to his knees, his hands clawing at his side as the poison and the curse waged a devastating war within him. His form seemed to shimmer, his silhouette elongating, his features twisting in a way that was not quite human. The monster he feared becoming was breaking free. He looked at her, his eyes wide with agony and terror. Not for himself, but for her. "Run," he rasped, his voice a distorted growl. "Get away from me." But Alara didn't run. All the fear she had ever felt in her life coalesced into a single sharp point of clarity. She would not abandon him. She would not let this man who had shielded her with his own body be consumed by darkness. She dropped to her knees before him, ignoring the shouts and the fighting. She placed both her hands on his face, her touch firm and steady despite the tremors racking his body. The shadowy veins writhed under her palms, cold and malevolent. "Look at me, Kieran," she commanded, her voice ringing with an authority she had never known she possessed. He had never told her his given name, but she knew it as if it had been whispered into her soul. His pain-filled eyes focused on hers. She poured her gift into him, not the gentle stream she normally used, but a floodgate, a torrent of every ounce of calm and quiet strength within her. She pushed it against the tide of the curse, a desperate attempt to hold back the encroaching night. The shadows receded from his face, the convulsions lessening. He gasped, his body still tense, but no longer on the verge of monstrous transformation. He had regained a sliver of control thanks to her. In the background, the fighting had stopped. Marcus had Alaric on his knees, a blade to his throat. Every eye in the hall was now fixed on the Emperor and the wolfless girl who held his face in her hands, holding back a tide of dark magic no one had ever witnessed before. Kieran, weakened and bleeding but lucid, rose unsteadily to his feet, pulling Alara up with him. He kept one arm wrapped around her, holding her to his injured side, as if she were his anchor in a raging sea. "General Alaric," he said, his voice ragged but clear, "for treason, for attempted murder of a protected member of my court, and for the use of forbidden poisons, you are sentenced to death." Alaric spat on the floor, hatred burning in his eyes. "Kill me then, but they have all seen you. They have seen the monster you are." "They have seen a king who was poisoned," Kieran countered, his gaze sweeping the stunned faces of the lords. "And they have seen the woman who saved him." He looked down at Alara, his expression softening with a fierce, protective emotion she had never seen before. "She is not my crutch. She is my strength." It was a public declaration, a defiance of every tradition their society held dear. He was not just protecting her, he was elevating her, acknowledging her worth in front of the entire ruling class. But the poison was still in his system. His strength was failing. He swayed on his feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Marcus, the dungeons," he managed, before his eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed, pulling Alara down with him. The last thing Alara saw before healers and guards swarmed them was the cold, triumphant smile on Alaric's face as he was dragged away. He might have lost the immediate battle, but he believed his poison would still give him the final victory. The royal healers worked with frantic urgency in the Emperor's chambers, but they were fighting a losing battle. The poison coating the assassin's blade was unlike any they had encountered, an alchemical nightmare crafted with the specific purpose of inflaming Kieran's curse. It resisted every antidote, turning his blood to fire and feeding the shadows that now threatened to consume him entirely. Alara watched from the doorway, helpless as they packed the wound and poured useless potions down his throat. Kieran lay unconscious, his body racked with violent tremors, the dark veins pulsing in a sickening rhythm with his fading heartbeat. His breathing grew shallow, a death rattle in the making. "There is nothing more we can do," the head healer finally admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. He turned to Marcus, who stood grimly by the bedside. "The poison has bonded with his affliction. It is devouring him from the inside out. He will not last the night." Marcus's face, usually a mask of stoic resolve, crumpled in despair. He looked from his dying king to Alara, his eyes filled with a desperate, hopeless plea. Lady Ravenna pushed through the crowd of healers, her amber eyes blazing with determination. "Get out," she commanded. "All of you. You've done all conventional medicine can do." The royal healers bristled at her tone, but Marcus enforced her order with a sharp gesture. When only the three of them remained with Kieran, Ravenna turned to Alara. "The time has come," she said gravely. "The poison was designed to accelerate the curse beyond control. It's working exactly as intended. The shadow veins will reach his heart within hours." "There must be something we can do," Alara pleaded, her voice breaking as she approached the bedside. Kieran's face was pale and slick with sweat, his features contorted in a rictus of unimaginable pain even in unconsciousness. Ravenna placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. "There is one possibility, but it requires everything you are, everything you might become. There is no certainty of success, and the cost—" She hesitated. "The cost may be your own life." "Tell me," Alara demanded without hesitation. The Spirit Wolf clan possessed the ability to transfer life force, to pour their own essence into another, to heal mortal wounds or cure disease. Ravenna's eyes were solemn. "But such transfers are dangerous. Too little, and the recipient dies. Too much, and the giver's spirit is extinguished. How do I control it? How do I know how much to give?" "You don't," Ravenna said simply. "It's an act of pure intuition, guided by the bond between giver and receiver." Her gaze sharpened. "And there must be a bond, Alara, a true connection beyond healer and patient." The implication was clear. Ravenna was asking if Alara's feelings for Kieran ran deep enough to create the spiritual bridge necessary for such profound magic. Alara looked at Kieran's suffering form, and all pretense fell away. The truth she had been hiding even from herself rose to the surface like a silver moon emerging from clouds. "I love him," she whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. "I didn't choose to, didn't want to, but I do." Ravenna nodded, unsurprised. "Love is the most ancient and powerful magic. It may be enough." She reached into her robes and withdrew a small vial filled with luminous silver liquid. "This is essence of moonflower, gathered at the peak of the full moon. It will help awaken your dormant abilities, allowing you to access your full heritage. But be warned, once taken, there is no turning back. The woman who drinks this will never again be the Alara who stands before me now." "The Alara who stands before you now was never truly real," she replied, taking the vial. "I've lived my entire life as a shadow of myself, defined by what I lacked rather than what I might possess." She uncorked the vial, the scent of night-blooming flowers and fresh mountain streams filling her senses. "For Kieran," she said softly, and drank the shimmering liquid in one swallow. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Heat blazed through her veins, her skin tingling as if touched by thousands of tiny lightning strikes. The pendant at her throat grew white-hot, searing into her flesh but causing no pain. Her vision blurred, then sharpened to preternatural clarity. Sounds intensified. She could hear the labored beating of Kieran's heart, the rush of blood through his veins, the whispering current of the curse as it devoured him cell by cell. Most shocking of all, she could suddenly feel the presence of something within her. Not a wolf as others knew it, but a luminous being of pure spiritual energy that had always existed at her core, dormant and waiting. It unfurled within her consciousness like a flower opening to moonlight, ancient knowledge flooding her mind in a torrent of images and sensations. "Leave us!" she commanded, her voice resonating with newfound power. "What happens next must be witnessed by no one." Ravenna hesitated, then nodded. "Trust your instincts. They are the accumulated wisdom of your ancestors." She squeezed Alara's hand once, then departed, taking Marcus with her. Alone with Kieran, Alara sat on the edge of his bed and took his hands in hers. The connection sparked as it always did, but now she could see the magic at work. Silver threads of her energy meeting the dark corruption of the curse, light battling shadow in an eternal dance. "Kieran!" she called, reaching for him, not just physically but spiritually, sending her consciousness searching for his amidst the maelstrom of pain and poison. "Come back to me." She found him retreating, his spirit withdrawing from the agony of his physical form, seeking the peace of oblivion. With gentle insistence, she drew him back, creating a sanctuary within their joined consciousness where the pain couldn't reach. Ilara? His voice in this spiritual space was clear, unmarred by suffering. What is happening? I'm trying to save you, she explained, maintaining the fragile connection between them. The poison is killing you. Your healers have no cure. Understanding dawned in his ethereal features. The curse is winning. Yes, but I can fight it. I've discovered what I truly am. She showed him then, the awakened spirit within her, the heritage she'd been denied. I am of the Spirit Wolf clan, the people your ancestors destroyed. The same blood that created the curse now offers you salvation. He recoiled slightly, ancient enmities momentarily overriding their connection. Our bloodlines have been enemies for centuries. And what has that hatred brought us? She challenged. Endless suffering, a curse that devours you, a gift in me that was suppressed until it withered. She reached for him again. Perhaps that is why we found each other, not to continue the cycle of vengeance, but to end it. Doubt flickered across his features. Why would you save me? After everything my family did to yours? After what I did to your father? Because love doesn't calculate debts or demand payment. Because I see the man you truly are beneath the crown and curse. Her spiritual form drew closer to his. Because I believe we were meant to heal an ancient wound. Indecision wavered in his expression, then resolved into acceptance. What must I do? Open yourself to me completely, she instructed. No barriers, no reservations. Let me in, as you've never let anyone in before. His spiritual form nodded, and she felt the walls around his consciousness dissolve. For the first time, she saw him utterly vulnerable, his soul laid bare, the lonely child who had lost his parents too young, the young man crushed by responsibility, the king fighting daily against pain that would have broken lesser men, and beneath it all, a heart of profound integrity and unexpected tenderness, carefully hidden from a world that would interpret such qualities as weakness. In turn, she opened herself to him, her lifetime of shame and isolation, her quiet strength born of adversity, her newfound heritage, and most terrifyingly, the depth of her love for him. No secrets, no hiding, complete vulnerability. Now, she whispered, we return, and I fight for your life. Their consciousnesses reintegrated with their physical forms. Ilara gasped as sensation flooded back, the weight of Kieran's hands in hers, the heat of his fever-ravaged body, the oppressive presence of the curse seeking dominance. She knew what she had to do. It was not a thought but a cellular certainty. Her touch could soothe him, but soothing was no longer enough. He needed more. He needed all of her. She leaned over him, her hair brushing against his fevered brow. She remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell, ancient tales of the first spirit wolves, of bonds so powerful they could rewrite fate, of mates who could heal each other with a single true act of love. I am not Wolfless, she whispered to him. I was just waiting for you. She lowered her head and pressed her lips to his. It was not a soft, tentative kiss. It was an act of pure, unconditional giving. As their lips met, she closed her eyes and unleashed her gift, not as a soothing balm, but as a lightning strike. A torrent of life and light poured directly into his soul. She gave him everything she was, her calm, her resilience, her quiet strength, and the fierce newfound love that was now the core of her being. Something shattered. A barrier deep within her that had been in place her entire life crumbled to dust. A blinding silver light erupted from her, filling the room with radiance so intense that it penetrated stone and wood, illuminating the entire eastern face of the onyx spire like a beacon. At the heart of the light, a new presence fully awakened within her. Her spirit wolf, a creature of moonlight and ancient power, a being of pure healing and protection. She finally understood. She wasn't wolfless. Her gift, her soothing presence was her wolf, A different kind of power, a spirit wolf that had been dormant, waiting for the catalyst of a true mate's bond to awaken. Through their kiss, her power flooded into Kieran. The silver light attacked the shadows, burning them away. It neutralized the poison, cleansed his blood, and went straight to the heart of the ancient curse that had plagued his bloodline for generations. It did not just soothe the curse, it unmade it. It healed the fractured soul of his ancestor, breaking the chain of pain forever. The dark veins on his skin dissolved into nothing. The fever broke. The shallow, ragged breaths evened out, deepening into the slow, steady rhythm of healthy sleep. Color returned to his face, the lines of pain smoothing away, leaving only the strong, handsome features of the man beneath. Alara pulled back, gasping, her own body trembling with the force of what had just passed through her. The light receded, coalescing back into her being. She felt whole. For the first time in her life, she felt the warm, comforting presence of her own spirit wolf settled peacefully in her soul. Kieran's eyes fluttered open. The storm was gone from them. They were clear, the color of a calm morning sky after a cleansing rain. He looked at her, his gaze filled with wonder and love so profound it stole her breath. "Alara," he breathed, his voice clear and strong, free from the rasp of pain for the first time since she had met him. He raised a hand and gently cupped her cheek. "My mate." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a truth now written on both of their souls. The mating bond, forged not in a ritual of power, but in an act of selfless sacrifice and love, snapped into place, a golden cord of light visible only to them, connecting them heart to heart, soul to soul. Marcus, who had returned to check on them, fell to one knee at the doorway. "My queen," he said, his voice thick with emotion and awe. Alara barely heard him. She was lost in the eyes of her mate, her king. The wolfless girl was gone. The outcast was gone. In their place was a queen with a power more rare and precious than any shifter strength, and a king who had been reborn in her light. The shadows had fled, and a new dawn was breaking over the onyx spire. News of the emperor's miraculous recovery and the shattering of his ancient curse spread through the 5 kingdoms like wildfire. It was a tale that bordered on myth, the wolfless servant girl who was not wolfless at all, but the possessor of a sacred spiritual power not seen in generations. The girl who had saved the king not with fang and claw, but with a mate's kiss. General Alaric, awaiting execution in the deepest dungeon of the spire, laughed when he was told, dismissing it as a fanciful lie to cover the emperor's weakness. His laughter died when Kieran himself came to his cell. The man who stood before him was not the pained, guarded king he had sought to destroy. Kieran stood tall and relaxed, the constant tension gone from his shoulders. The lines of agony were erased from his face, and his eyes were clear and calm. The suffocating aura of pain was replaced by a quiet, confident power that was more intimidating than his previous fury had ever been. He was whole. He was healed. "It seems your poison had an unintended effect, Uncle," Kieran said, his voice devoid of anger, holding only remote, final judgment. "It forced a bond that has saved my life and my lineage. In trying to destroy me, you have made me stronger than ever before." Alaric stared, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He had not just failed. He had created the very thing he sought to prevent, a secure, unassailable king. His entire life's ambition had turned to ash in a single night. "Your execution is scheduled for dawn," Kieran continued dispassionately, "but I find I no longer require your death." Alaric's expression shifted to cautious hope. "You would show mercy?" "Not mercy, strategy. Death is too quick, too easy. Instead, you will be stripped of rank and title, your lands forfeit to the crown. You will live out your days in the Northern Territories, serving as a common soldier under commanders who were once your subordinates." Kieran's eyes were cold. "You will witness the empire I build, the peace I establish. You will see the legacy of strength without cruelty that you claimed was impossible. And you will know that you were wrong about everything." It was a punishment far more sophisticated than execution, forcing a proud alpha to live in disgrace, stripped of power and position, condemned to watch his nephew succeed where he had predicted failure. Alaric's face contorted with impotent rage. "You think this changes anything? The wolf packs will never accept a spirit wolf as their queen. Her kind were hunted to extinction for a reason. They were too powerful, too different. The alphas will rebel rather than bow to her." "Perhaps," Kieran acknowledged. "Those who cannot adapt to a new era often find themselves left behind by history." He turned to leave, then paused. "You were right about one thing, Uncle. I was weak, not because I sought peace where you desired war, but because I allowed the pain of the curse to isolate me from my own heart. That weakness is gone now." He departed without another word, leaving Alaric to contemplate the completeness of his defeat. Kieran returned to his private chambers, where Alara waited by the window. She wore a simple gown of white silk, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. The silver pendant gleamed at her throat, no longer hidden but displayed proudly. She turned as he entered, her face illuminated by the afternoon sunlight. "It's done?" she asked. "Yes. He leaves for the north tonight under heavy guard." "Not execution?" Kieran moved to her side, taking her hands in his. "Death would make him a martyr to those who share his views. This way, he becomes a living reminder of the consequences of betrayal." He studied her face. "Do you disapprove?" She shook her head. "It's just, perhaps even merciful in its way." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "There is much to do. The court is in chaos. Half the nobles don't know whether to celebrate my recovery or panic at the emergence of a spirit wolf in their midst." "And the other half?" she asked with a small smile. "Are scrambling to secure favorable positions with the new queen." The word hung between them. Queen. A title neither had spoken aloud since the bonding. "Is that what I am to be?" she asked quietly. "You are my mate," he answered simply. "In the eyes of Wolflaw, that makes you my queen, but more importantly, you are my equal, my balance." He raised her hand to his lips. "What our ancestors severed in hatred, we have rejoined in love. The spirit wolf and the shadow king, united at last." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus entered, followed by Lady Ravenna. "Your Majesties," he bowed deeply. "Riders have arrived from the Silver Moon Pack." Alara tensed. "My sister?" "Lady Seraphina and your mother request an audience," Marcus confirmed. "They were informed of recent events and traveled with remarkable speed." "Bring them to the Eastern Solar," Kieran instructed. "We'll receive them there." When Marcus departed, Ravenna approached Alara. "Your transformation is complete," she observed, studying her with knowing eyes. "The ancient blood has fully awakened." Alara nodded. "I can feel it. Knowledge, memories, abilities that aren't mine yet somehow are. The voices of my ancestors whisper to me in dreams. As it should be. You are the first true spirit wolf to walk among us in generations. The last high priestess of a clan thought extinct." Ravenna's amber eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "I have served 5 emperors, waiting for this day. The prophecy fulfilled at last." "Prophecy?" Kieran questioned sharply. "When Lyria Moonshadow laid the curse upon your ancestor, she also left a promise. When shadow and spirit join as one, the curse shall break and healing begun. Most interpreted it as meaningless defiance. I recognized it as foresight." She reached into her robes and withdrew an ancient scroll. "This contains the complete history of the Spirit Wolf clan, their customs, abilities, governance. It belongs to you now, my queen." Alara accepted the scroll with reverence. "Thank you for preserving our history." "It was my sacred duty," Ravenna bowed. "And now, I believe you have family waiting." The reunion with her sister and mother was a storm of emotions. Seraphina rushed to embrace Alara, tears streaming down her beautiful face. "They said you broke an ancient curse, that you're a spirit wolf, that you're to be queen." She pulled back, searching her sister's face. "Is it true?" "All of it," Alara confirmed softly. Her mother approached more cautiously, her eyes wide with disbelief. Your grandmother always said you were special, that your lack of a traditional wolf didn't mean emptiness, but difference. She touched Alara's cheek with trembling fingers. I never understood until now. None of us did, Alara assured her. I'm still learning what it means myself. Serafina turned to Kieran, who had remained respectfully distant during the family reunion. She dropped into a formal curtsy. Your Majesty, my family is honored by your recognition of Alara's worth. The honor is mine, he replied with genuine warmth. Your sister saved not only my life, but my soul. The 5 kingdoms owe her a debt that can never be repaid. And yet I hear whispers of resistance, Serafina said boldly. Alpha packs who question the elevation of one they considered wolfless, traditionalists who fear the return of spirit wolf magic. Kieran's expression hardened slightly. Change never comes without resistance. Those who cannot accept a new era will find themselves left behind by it. Or, Alara interjected, stepping to his side, they can be helped to understand the benefits such change brings. She looked up at him. We broke a cycle of hatred and vengeance that poisoned both our bloodlines for generations. Surely we can find ways to heal other ancient wounds. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. As always, you bring balance to my more unyielding instincts. He addressed Serafina and her mother. You are welcome at court for as long as you wish to stay. The formal mating ceremony will take place at the next full moon. I hope you will stand with Alara on that day. We would be honored, her mother replied, tears glistening in her eyes. Later, when they were again alone, Kieran found Alara in the ancient library, poring over the scroll Ravenna had given her. Fascinating reading? He asked, moving to stand behind her chair. It describes abilities I never imagined possible, she admitted. Healing mortal wounds, communicating across vast distances through dream walking, even temporarily transferring one's consciousness into animals to see through their eyes. She looked up at him. The spirit wolves weren't destroyed because they were weak. They were hunted because they were too powerful. Power that frightened those who couldn't understand it, Kieran acknowledged. A pattern repeated throughout history, fear of difference leading to violence. A pattern we have a chance to break. She rose and faced him. The scroll speaks of spirit wolf sanctuaries, places where those with dormant abilities could be taught to awaken and control their gifts. What if we re-established them? What if there are others like me, believing themselves flawed when they're simply different? Kieran considered her words. You would create a new generation of spirit wolves? Not to oppose traditional wolves, but to complement them, to restore balance to our world. Her eyes shone with purpose. Strength isn't only measured in fang and claw. Healing, empathy, spiritual connection, these too are forms of power. He smiled, a rare expression that transformed his severe features. You've been queen for less than a day, and already you plan to reshape our society. Is that not what queens do? She challenged gently. He pulled her into his arms. Indeed it is, and I cannot imagine a more worthy purpose. His expression grew serious. Whatever you wish to build, I will support. Whatever vision you hold for our people, I will help bring to fruition. We are bound now, not just as mates, but as partners in creating a new world. She reached up to touch his face, marveling at the absence of pain in his features. Does it feel strange, being free of the curse after so long? Like learning to breathe again after a decade underwater, he admitted. The silence in my mind, the absence of constant pain, it's disorienting, liberating. His arms tightened around her. I find myself wondering who I might have been without those years of suffering. You would still be you, she said softly. Strong, principled, determined. The curse didn't create those qualities. It merely tested them. As your isolation tested you. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Perhaps that's why we recognize each other so clearly. We both know what it means to endure. And now we learn what it means to thrive, she whispered, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The formal uniting ceremony took place beneath the full moon in the ancient stone circle atop the highest peak of the onyx spire. Every important lord and alpha from the 5 kingdoms was in attendance, their curiosity and awe palpable. They had come expecting to witness a political necessity. They were instead treated to a display of true, undeniable love and power. Alara's family stood in a place of honor, her mother weeping openly, Seraphina standing tall and proud beside her, genuine admiration in her eyes for the sister she had once pitied. Alara wore a gown of pure white embroidered with silver thread that seemed to glow with its own light. Around her throat, the ancient pendant of the spirit wolf high priestess gleamed in the moonlight. Kieran stood resplendent in formal black and silver, his bearing regal, but his eyes soft whenever they fell upon his mate. Lady Ravenna conducted the ceremony, her voice carrying across the stone circle as she invoked ancient traditions. For centuries, our people have been divided, wolf from spirit, strength from healing, power from wisdom. Tonight, we witness the rejoining of what should never have been sundered. Kieran took Alara's hand, their fingers lacing together. "Before my people and the spirits of old," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction, "I claim Alara as my mate, my wife, my queen. Her heart is my heart. Her soul is my soul. Her people are my people. Together we will lead this kingdom into a new age." He then leaned down and, in the tradition of their people, bit gently into the juncture of her neck and shoulder. It was not a mark of ownership, but of union, a permanent sign of their mating bond. Alara felt a jolt of pleasure and completion as his fangs pierced her skin, sealing their connection. The mark glowed with a soft silver light for a moment before settling into an intricate, beautiful design of a spiraling wolf. In response, Alara rose on her toes and pressed her lips to the same spot on his neck. Silver light flared from her kiss, leaving a matching mark on his skin. It was an unprecedented act. A mate had never marked an emperor before. It was a symbol of their equality, of a partnership that would forever change the foundations of their harsh, patriarchal society. Their union heralded a profound transformation. In the months that followed, Alara established the first spirit wolf sanctuary in centuries, a place where others like her, those thought wolfless or deficient, could discover their true nature. To everyone's surprise, many came forward, drawn by rumors of the spirit wolf queen who had broken an ancient curse. Under Alara's guidance, these individuals learned to value empathy, wisdom, and healing over brute strength. The old, cruel traditions began to erode, replaced by a culture that was learning the true meaning of balance. Kieran's reign, which had begun in fear and pain, was now known as a golden age of peace and justice, guided by the light of his spirit wolf queen. 1 year later, Alara stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the same snow-capped mountains that had once seemed so forbidding. Now, they were gilded by the warm light of a summer evening, majestic rather than menacing. She was not alone. Kieran's arms were wrapped around her, his chin resting atop her head. In her own arms, she held a small sleeping bundle wrapped in soft furs. Their son Orion had been born a month prior. He had his father's black hair, and when he was awake, his mother's calm, empathetic eyes. Already the healers reported sensing both traditional wolf and spirit wolf energies within him, a perfect balance of his parents' bloodlines, living proof that ancient enemies could create something beautiful together. "He's sleeping again," Kieran murmured, his voice a low, happy rumble against her back. Alara laughed softly. "He inherited your brooding nature, and I think he inherited your ability to bring peace wherever you go." Kieran pressed a kiss to her temple, then looked down at his son, his face filled with a love so deep it was bottomless. Below them, in the castle courtyard, the sounds of laughter and music drifted up on the evening breeze. Children played where grim-faced warriors once drilled. Merchants and commoners mingled with lords and ladies, the old hierarchies softened by the new ethos of the court. The onyx spire, once a fortress of pain and isolation, had become a beacon of hope and renewal. Under their joint rule, the 5 kingdoms were experiencing unprecedented peace and prosperity. "Do you ever miss it?" Alara asked, her voice thoughtful. "The fear you commanded, the power that came from being the Shadow King?" Kieran was silent for a moment, considering. "I thought that was power," he said finally. "But it was just a cage made of pain." He squeezed her gently, his gaze falling on their son. "This is power. This is strength. This is everything." Alara turned in his arms, her free hand coming up to cup his jaw. The mate marks on their necks glowed faintly in the twilight, a constant comforting warmth against their skin. "I'm glad I tripped," she whispered, a playful smile touching her lips. He chuckled, the sound rich and full of life. "I am eternally grateful for your clumsiness, my love." He leaned in and captured her lips in a slow, tender kiss, a kiss not of desperation or healing, but of pure, contented love. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting their small family in golden light, they stood together in perfect balance, spirit and shadow, healing and strength, past and future united. A testament to the fact that the greatest power is not the ability to command, but the courage to love, and that even in the deepest darkness, light is waiting to be born. 5 years passed since the night Kieran and Alara's bond shattered an ancient curse and reshaped the future of the 5 kingdoms. The Onyx Spire, once a fortress of isolation and pain, had transformed into the vibrant heart of a flourishing empire. Where grim-faced warriors had once drilled in rigid formation, gardens now bloomed, filled with rare plants and healing herbs. The harsh black stone remained, but climbing vines softened its edges, and windows once sealed against mountain winds stood open to welcome light and fresh air. Most remarkable was the new eastern wing, a sweeping structure of pale stone and expansive glass that housed the Spirit Wolf Academy. Here, those once labeled Wolfless discovered their true heritage under Alara's guidance. Students of all ages learned to access abilities long thought extinct: dream walking, spiritual healing, animal communion, and the rare gift of emotional resonance that allowed one soul to touch another across physical boundaries. The Academy represented the most visible of many changes wrought by the unprecedented partnership of Shadow King and Spirit Wolf Queen. Traditional alphas initially resisted, viewing these developments with suspicion or outright hostility, but the results were difficult to dispute. Border conflicts had diminished, trade flourished, and a new prosperity spread throughout the 5 kingdoms. On this particular morning, Alara stood in the Academy's central courtyard, watching a group of young students practicing the art of spiritual projection, sending their consciousness beyond their physical forms to connect with the natural world around them. Among them was a boy of 4, with unruly black hair and intense concentration shaping his young features. Orion, son of Emperor Kieran and Queen Alara, possessed an extraordinary blend of his parents' abilities, his father's commanding presence and analytical mind, coupled with his mother's spiritual sensitivity and healing touch. Unlike most children who manifested either traditional wolf or spirit wolf abilities, Orion carried both lineages in perfect balance, embodying the unity his parents had forged. "He grows stronger each day," observed Lady Ravenna, who had become the Academy's master teacher. The years had barely touched her, though silver now dominated her once dark hair. "Soon he will surpass even your abilities." "As he should," Alara replied with a mother's pride. "Each generation builds upon the foundations laid by those who came before." She watched as Orion successfully projected his consciousness into a nearby falcon, the bird calmly perching on his small outstretched arm, as boy and raptor shared a moment of perfect communion. Such control at his age was unprecedented, even among full-blooded spirit wolves. A respectful cough interrupted their observation. Marcus, now Chief Imperial Advisor, approached with a formal bow. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. Emperor Kieran requests your presence in the Great Council Chamber. The delegates from the Northern Territories have arrived." Alara nodded, unsurprised. These delegates had been expected for weeks. Representatives from the last regions still resistant to the social reforms spreading throughout the empire. The Northern Territories, once commanded by the disgraced General Alaric, remained bastions of traditional alpha supremacy, viewing the changes in the Central Kingdoms with deep suspicion. "How many came?" she asked as they walked briskly through the palace corridors. 7, Marcus replied. Led by Alpha Thorn of the Frost Fang Pack, they brought a substantial honor guard, 30 warriors, all heavily armed. A show of strength rather than diplomacy, Alara noted. And their demeanor? Respectful but rigid. They acknowledged the Emperor with proper deference but seemed uncomfortable in the presence of mixed-ability courtiers. This, too, was unsurprising. The Northern Pack still segregated their populations, relegating those without traditional wolf manifestations to servant status, or worse. The very concept of spirit wolves, beings with different but equally valuable abilities, threatened the foundation of their social hierarchy. "And my uncle?" she asked, referring to the man whose actions had nearly destroyed Kieran 5 years earlier. "Any word of his influence in these proceedings?" Marcus's scarred face tightened. "Alaric keeps to his assigned post at the northern border outpost. Officially, he holds no rank or authority. Unofficially," he hesitated. "There are rumors he still commands loyalty among certain factions. Some say he has been seen in the company of shamans from beyond the frost wastes, practitioners of blood magic." Alara absorbed this information with growing concern. Blood magic was ancient and forbidden, a corrupted counterpart to the natural energies harnessed by spirit wolves. It drew power from sacrifice and pain rather than harmony and balance. "Have you told Kieran?" "This morning. He has increased security throughout the spire, though discreetly. He doesn't wish to appear hostile to our guests." They reached the massive doors of the great council chamber, where 2 imperial guards stood at attention. The men bowed deeply to their queen, then opened the doors to reveal a scene of carefully orchestrated diplomacy. Kieran sat at the head of the long obsidian table, every inch the imperial ruler in formal black and silver. The years had added subtle distinctions to his appearance. A few strands of silver at his temples, fine lines at the corners of his eyes that appeared when he smiled, which he did far more often now. Yet his presence remained commanding, his storm-gray eyes sharp and penetrating as he assessed the northern delegates. The visitors were immediately identifiable by their traditional furs and leather armor adorned with wolf teeth and bone talismans. They were large, imposing figures, each bearing the unmistakable aura of alpha dominance. At their head sat a man in his prime, Alpha Thorn of the Frost Fang Pack, his beard intricately braided with silver beads, his eyes cold and evaluating. Conversation ceased as Alara entered. Kieran rose immediately, extending his hand to her in a gesture that was both affectionate and politically significant. An emperor standing for his queen, acknowledging her as equal. "My lords," he addressed the delegates, "may I present Queen Alara, my mate and co-ruler of the United Kingdoms." The northern alphas rose stiffly, offering formal bows that contained the minimum required deference. Only Alpha Thorn held her gaze directly, his expression carefully neutral, though his scent betrayed subtle hostility. "Queen Alara," he acknowledged, "your reputation extends even to our remote territories." "Alpha Thorn," she responded with equal formality, "the northern territories have long been in our thoughts. We are pleased you accepted our invitation to discuss matters of mutual benefit." She took her seat at Kieran's right hand, feeling the immediate activation of their mate bond, a warm, reassuring connection that had only strengthened over the years. Through it, she sensed his controlled tension and strategic awareness of the delicate situation. "As I was explaining to our honored guests," Kieran continued smoothly, "the trade routes through Thunder Pass would benefit both our regions. The northern silver mines could find expanded markets in the southern kingdoms, while northern settlements would gain reliable access to grain and textiles they currently import at great expense from across the narrow sea." Alpha Thorn nodded thoughtfully. "The economic advantages are clear, Your Majesty. Yet questions remain regarding jurisdictional matters." "Meaning?" Kieran prompted, though both he and Alara knew precisely what concerned the Northern Alpha. "Meaning," Thorn elaborated carefully, "that our ways differ from those now practiced in the Central Kingdoms. Our pack structures, our traditions regarding the proper role and place of those without wolf manifestations." His gaze flickered briefly to Alara. We would require assurances that imperial law would not supersede pack law within our territories. The true issue was exposed. The Northerners feared that closer ties with the Central Kingdoms would threaten their rigid hierarchy, particularly their treatment of those they still termed Wolfless. Kieran's expression remained diplomatically neutral. The Empire respects the sovereignty of all packs within their traditional territories. We have no desire to impose cultural changes through force or coercion. He leaned forward slightly. However, imperial law does guarantee certain basic protections for all citizens, regardless of ability or manifestation. One of the other Northern delegates, an older alpha with a heavily scarred face, spoke up. "With respect, Your Majesty, such protections undermine the natural order. Those without wolves lack the strength and instinct to contribute meaningfully to a pack's survival." Alara felt a familiar pang, the echo of prejudice she had faced throughout her early life. Yet where once such words would have pierced her with shame, now they merely saddened her. "Elder Krall," she addressed the scarred alpha directly, "I understand your perspective. It was the prevailing wisdom throughout my childhood as well." Her voice remained gentle, but carried an underlying strength. Yet the past 5 years have demonstrated another possibility. Those once labeled Wolfless have shown remarkable abilities in healing, diplomacy, education, and spiritual guidance. The Academy has documented over 300 individuals with spirit wolf manifestations, abilities that complement rather than compete with traditional strengths. "Spirit wolves," Elder Krall repeated, with poorly disguised skepticism. "Convenient legends resurrected to elevate the status of the deficient." A tense silence fell over the chamber. The insult, while oblique, was unmistakable. Kieran's hand tightened briefly on the armrest of his chair, the only visible sign of his anger. Through their bond, Alara felt his immediate protective rage, then his deliberate mastery of it. "Perhaps," he suggested with dangerous calm, "a demonstration would be more convincing than debate." He nodded to Marcus, who opened a side door. A small procession entered, Lady Ravenna followed by 4 Academy students of varying ages. Among them was Orion, who immediately spotted his parents and straightened his small shoulders with childish dignity. "These individuals represent different manifestations of spirit wolf abilities," Alara explained. "With your permission, they will provide a brief demonstration." Alpha Thorn hesitated, then nodded curtly. "We are curious to observe these claimed abilities." The demonstration proceeded with practiced precision. An adolescent girl healed a deliberately inflicted cut on a guard's arm, the wound sealing without scar under her glowing touch. A young man communed with a hawk, sending it to retrieve a specific object from another wing of the palace. An older woman demonstrated dream walking, accurately describing the sleeping thoughts of a volunteer from among the Northern delegation, much to his evident discomfort. Finally, Orion stepped forward. Though barely reaching his father's waist in height, he carried himself with natural confidence. "My name is Orion," he stated clearly. "I carry both lineages, the Imperial Wolf and the Spirit Wolf." He closed his eyes in concentration, and the air around him shimmered. Gradually, 2 distinct manifestations appeared. On his right, the translucent form of a powerful black wolf with silver eyes. On his left, a being of pure silvery light in lupine form. The manifestations circled him, then merged into a single magnificent creature that combined elements of both before dissolving back into Orion's small form. The Northern delegates stared in undisguised astonishment. Such a dual manifestation was unprecedented in their experience, concrete, undeniable evidence that the 2 wolf types could coexist in harmony. "This is the future we envision," Kieran stated into the stunned silence. "Not the elimination of traditional ways, but their enhancement through integration with abilities long suppressed, strength and healing, authority and empathy, balance in all things." Alpha Thorn seemed genuinely shaken. "The child, he truly manifests both?" "He does," Alara confirmed, "as may others of mixed lineage, given proper training and acceptance." The diplomatic discussions continued well into the evening, the tone gradually shifting from hostile skepticism to cautious curiosity. By the time the northern delegation retired to their assigned chambers, preliminary agreements had been established for both trade routes and cultural exchange, including the possibility of northern youths studying at the academy. Later that night, in the privacy of their chambers, Elara and Kieran discussed the day's developments while Orion slept peacefully in his adjacent room. "They're still deeply suspicious," Kieran observed, stretching out beside Elara on their bed. "Particularly Elder Krull. Did you notice how he watched Orion? As if cataloging a potential threat." "I noticed," Elara sighed, nestling against him. But Alpha Thorn seemed genuinely impressed. "There was a moment when Orion demonstrated the dual manifestation. I sensed something almost like longing from him." "Longing?" "For integration, for wholeness." She traced patterns on Kieran's chest thoughtfully. "I believe many alphas sense the imbalance in their society, but fear what change might bring. They've built their identity around traditional strength for so long that they can't imagine power existing in other forms." Kieran captured her wandering hand, bringing it to his lips. "You're remarkably generous toward those who would have kept you in servitude." "Understanding isn't the same as acceptance," she clarified. "I don't excuse their prejudice, but I recognize its roots in fear and limited perspective, the same fear that drove your ancestors to nearly eradicate mine." He was silent for a moment, and yet, despite everything, here we are. His arm tightened around her. "The curse broken, the kingdoms united, our son carrying both bloodlines in harmony." "Progress," she agreed with a smile, "though not without opposition. Marcus mentioned rumors about Alaric." "Consorting with blood shamans beyond the frost wastes," Kieran finished grimly. "Yes, our spies confirm it. He's been seen at ancient ritual sites associated with dark magic." A chill ran through Elara, despite the warmth of their bed. "Do you think he would risk such forbidden arts? Even the northern pacts consider blood magic taboo." Alaric spent 5 years in disgrace, watching everything he believed in dismantled by the nephew he despises. Hatred that deep can drive men to extremes. Kieran's expression darkened. "Perhaps I should have executed him after all." "And made him a martyr?" She shook her head. "No, you chose mercy, and it was the right decision. Whatever he plans, we'll face it together, as we have everything else." A sudden disturbance interrupted their conversation. The pendant at Elara's throat flared with silver light, growing warm against her skin. Simultaneously, a small crystalline orb on their bedside table pulsed with matching energy. "The nursery ward," Elara gasped, already moving. Spirit wolf parents often created connection crystals linked to their children, allowing them to sense distress or danger, even at a distance. They reached Orion's room in moments, finding their son sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide with an awareness beyond his years. "Someone's coming," he whispered. "Someone with shadows inside them." Kieran immediately signaled the Imperial Guards while Elara knelt beside their son, placing a calming hand on his forehead. "What do you see, little one?" "A man with angry eyes," Orion replied, his voice eerily adult. "He walks through dreams with bloody hands. He's looking for me." A dreamwalker. Someone was attempting to invade their son's mind through the dreamscape, a violation of the most sacred spirit wolf taboos. Elara's protective instincts surged. She closed her eyes, accessing her own dreamwalking abilities, following the psychic thread that connected to her son. In the ethereal space between physical and spiritual realms, she sensed a dark presence, a corrupted version of spirit wolf ability, twisted and strengthened through blood sacrifice. With fierce maternal determination, she cast a protective barrier around Orion's consciousness, forcing the intruder back. For a moment, she glimpsed the attacker's identity, not Alaric himself, but a shaman under his influence, face painted with symbols of forbidden magic. The intruder recoiled from her counterattack, but not before sending a final message, less in words than in pure, malevolent intent. "This is only the beginning." When Alara opened her eyes, Kieran was watching her with concern. What happened? A blood shaman attempted to access Orion's mind through dreamwalking, she explained, still holding their son protectively. I repelled him, but... She hesitated, not wanting to frighten Orion further. But he'll try again, Kieran finished, understanding her unspoken concern. Orion looked between his parents, remarkably calm despite the attack. He wanted to see if I really have both wolves, the boy stated matter-of-factly. He didn't believe it was possible. Kieran and Alara exchanged worried glances. If Alaric was specifically targeting Orion, the situation was even more dangerous than they had feared. Their son represented the living embodiment of their unified bloodlines, physical proof that the ancient enmity between Shadow Kings and Spirit Wolves could be healed. To those who opposed this new order, he was a powerful symbol that needed to be destroyed. I'm not scared, Orion assured them, sensing their concern. My wolves protected me, and so did Mother. Kieran ruffled his son's hair with forced lightness. Of course they did, and they always will. He met Alara's gaze over Orion's head. But perhaps we should strengthen the palace wards nonetheless. The attempted dream-walking attack dramatically altered the atmosphere in the Onyx Spire. Security tightened throughout the palace. Spirit Wolf adepts with protective abilities were stationed at strategic locations. Lady Ravenna personally reinforced the spiritual barriers surrounding the royal family's chambers. Most significantly, the northern delegation found themselves under subtle but constant surveillance. While there was no direct evidence linking them to the Dreamwalker, the timing was too suspicious to ignore. Alpha Thorn requested an audience the following morning, clearly aware of the changed circumstances, though not the specific cause. Your Majesties, he addressed Kieran and Alara formally. I sense a disturbance has occurred. If my delegation has given offense in some way. No offense has been attributed to your party, Alpha Thorn, Kieran interrupted smoothly. A minor security concern arose that required additional precautions. The Northern Alpha studied them both carefully. With respect, Emperor Kieran, the additional guards and Spirit Wolf practitioners suggest something beyond minor. If there is a threat to the Imperial family that might affect our negotiations, we should be informed. Alara exchanged a glance with her mate, making a swift decision. There was an attempt to access Prince Orion's mind through corrupted dreamwalking, she revealed. A blood shaman from beyond the frost wastes. Thorn's expression registered genuine shock. Blood magic? Against a child? Despite his previous reservations about spirit wolves, his reaction confirmed that some taboos transcended cultural differences. This is abhorrent. No true alpha would condone such an attack. We do not believe your delegation was involved, Kieran clarified. However, the timing suggests someone wishes to disrupt our negotiations. Someone with access to blood shamans and knowledge of spirit wolf abilities, Alara added, watching Thorn carefully. Someone who might benefit from continued division between North and South. Understanding dawned in the Northern Alpha's eyes. Alaric, he stated flatly. There have been rumors among the Northern packs. Some say he has abandoned traditional ways for darker paths, that his hatred has consumed him. What exactly have you heard? Kieran pressed. Thorn hesitated, clearly weighing his loyalties. Finally, he sighed heavily. Alaric disappeared from his assigned post 3 months ago. There were reports he was seen traveling with outcast shamans toward the frost wastes. Some say he seeks ancient magic to restore the old order, to return the Empire to traditional Alpha rule. He met their gaze directly. I did not share this information earlier because I considered it irrelevant to our negotiations. Many disgraced warriors make desperate claims and seek forbidden knowledge. Few achieve anything beyond their own destruction. Alaric is not an ordinary disgraced warrior, Kieran stated grimly. He was once the most respected military commander in 5 kingdoms. His strategic mind remains dangerous, regardless of his fall from favor. And if he has indeed embraced blood magic, Alara added, he may have acquired abilities that make him far more threatening than before. Thorn's expression hardened with decision. The attack on your son changes matters. Blood magic violates our most sacred laws. Whatever my reservations about spirit wolves and the changes in the Central Kingdoms, I cannot condone such methods." He straightened formally. "The Frostfang Pack offers its assistance in locating and neutralizing this threat." The offer was unexpected but welcome. With Alpha Thorn's cooperation, Imperial scouts and Northern trackers began searching the remote regions beyond the frost wastes. Spirit wolf adepts used dreamwalking and animal communion to extend their surveillance, while traditional warriors provided physical protection. Days passed with increasing tension. The Northern delegation remained at the Onyx Spire, their original diplomatic mission now secondary to the hunt for Alaric and his blood shamans. Alara divided her time between strengthening the palace's spiritual defenses and continuing Orion's training, teaching him to shield his own mind from further intrusions. Kieran focused on military preparations, anticipating that whatever Alaric planned would likely include physical as well as magical attacks. The Imperial Guard was placed on high alert, and messages were dispatched to loyal commanders throughout the Five Kingdoms. 7 days after the attempted dreamwalking incident, their vigilance was rewarded. A Northern scout returned with crucial information. Alaric had been located at an ancient ritual site deep within the Frozen Teeth, a mountain range so remote and treacherous that even the hardiest Northern packs rarely ventured there. "The blood moon approaches," Lady Ravenna warned during an emergency council session. 3 nights from now, when the moon turns red from atmospheric dust, such celestial events amplify magical energies, both beneficial and corrupted. If Alaric plans a major working of blood magic, that would be the optimal time. What exactly could he accomplish with such magic? Alpha Thorn questioned, his skepticism of magical matters evident despite recent events. Ravenna's expression grew grave. "Blood magic inverts the natural principles that spirit wolves honor. Where we seek harmony and healing, blood magic creates discord and destruction. With sufficient power and sufficient sacrifice, a blood shaman could theoretically create a curse far more devastating than the one that afflicted Emperor Kieran for a decade." "He wouldn't target me again," Kieran concluded. "I've already proven I can break such a curse through my bond with Alara. He would aim for something broader." The spirit wolves themselves, Alara realized with growing horror. He would attempt to curse all those with spirit wolf abilities, to suppress or corrupt their gifts. Ravenna nodded solemnly. "It's the logical target. By striking at spirit wolves throughout the Five Kingdoms, he could undo 5 years of progress in a single night. Those newly awakened to their abilities would be most vulnerable." "The Academy students," Alara whispered, maternal dread flooding her system. "Hundreds of children and adults just learning to control their gifts." "And Orion," Kieran added, his voice hardening with protective fury. "Our son represents everything Alaric despises, the union of bloodlines, the living proof that traditional and spirit wolves can coexist in harmony." Alpha Thorn, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Then we must strike first. I offer the warriors of the Frostfang Pack to join your Imperial Guard. We know the Frozen Teeth better than any Southerners. We can navigate its dangers." "A direct assault would be detected," Marcus cautioned. "Alaric was the Empire's greatest military strategist for decades. He will have prepared defenses against conventional attacks." "Then we must be unconventional," Kieran decided, his mind shifting into the tactical brilliance that had unified 5 warring kingdoms. A 2-pronged approach, a visible force to draw attention and engage any physical defenses, while a smaller team infiltrates the ritual site to disrupt the magical preparations. All eyes turned to Alara, whose spirit wolf abilities made her the obvious choice to lead the magical countermeasure. She felt the weight of their expectation and the terrible risk of what Kieran proposed. They had not been separated since forming their mate bond 5 years earlier. To be apart during such a dangerous confrontation. "I should lead the infiltration team," she agreed, despite her inner trepidation. "With a small group of our most skilled adepts, we can shield our approach spiritually while the military force draws physical attention." Kieran's expression remained impassive to all but her. Through their bond, she felt his profound reluctance warring with strategic necessity. They had ruled as true partners, facing every challenge side by side. This division of their strengths cut against the very foundation of their relationship. Yet both understood what was at stake. Their son, the Academy, the fragile peace they had built through years of careful work, the future they envisioned for the 5 kingdoms. "It is decided," Kirin announced, his imperial mask firmly in place. "We depart at dawn. Alpha Thorn will guide our combined forces to the approach of the ritual site. Queen Alara will lead the magical countermeasure with selected Spirit Wolf adepts. I will command the main assault force." As the council dispersed to prepare, Kirin and Alara remained behind, finally alone with the decision they had made. "I don't like this separation," he admitted, the mask slipping to reveal his concern. "Our strength has always been in our unity." "And it remains so," she assured him, taking his hands in hers. "Our bond doesn't weaken with distance. It extends between us, a golden thread connecting heart to heart." He pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Be careful, my love. Alaric's hatred has had 5 years to fester. Whatever dark magic he has embraced, it will be fueled by that hatred." "I will be cautious," she promised. "And you, my warrior king? Will you remember that you no longer bear the curse alone, that you need not sacrifice yourself to protect others?" His smile held a touch of rueful acknowledgement. "Old habits die reluctantly. But yes, I will remember." They spent that night with Orion, creating additional protective wards around their son and instructing the formidable team assigned to guard him in their absence. The boy, perceptive beyond his years, understood more than they explained. "You're going to fight the angry man," he stated as they prepared to leave his chambers, "the one with shadows inside." "We are," Alara confirmed, seeing no point in shielding him from a truth he had already intuited. "He wants to hurt people like us," Orion continued solemnly. "People with spirit wolves." "Yes," Kirin acknowledged, "but we won't let that happen." Orion nodded, his young face serious, but unafraid. "I know. You'll stop him because you're balanced. He only has one kind of strength." The simple, childish wisdom struck them both profoundly. It crystallized everything they had worked toward, not the triumph of one type of power over another, but the harmonious integration of different strengths. "From the wisdom of children," Alara murmured, embracing her son. "We'll return soon," Kirin promised, joining the embrace. "Stay within the palace wards. Listen to Lady Ravenna and your guards." "I will," Orion assured them. Then, with unexpected solemnity, he added, "Remember, both your wolves are strongest when they work together." As dawn broke over the onyx spire, 2 forces prepared to depart. The main assault group, Imperial Guards and Northern warriors under Kirin's command, assembled in the outer courtyard with weapons, provisions, and grim determination. The smaller infiltration team, Alara and 7 Spirit Wolf adepts, chosen for their stealth and protective abilities, gathered in the inner garden, preparing through meditation and spiritual alignment rather than physical armaments. Before mounting his war stallion, Kirin sought Alara one last time. Away from the eyes of their forces, he pressed his forehead to hers in an intimate gesture of connection. 3 days, he murmured. "We meet at the base of the frozen teeth in 3 days, regardless of what happens." 3 days, she echoed, memorizing the feel of him, the scent of him, storing it against the coming separation. He kissed her then, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact, his love, his fear, his absolute faith in her abilities. Through their bond, she returned those emotions tenfold, reminding him of their unbreakable connection. "For our son," he whispered against her lips, "for all the children who deserve a world of balance." "For the future we have built," she agreed, "and will continue to build long after Alaric is nothing but a fading memory." With that promise between them, they parted, the Shadow King and Spirit Wolf Queen, moving in different directions but toward a common purpose. United even in separation by a bond that transcended physical proximity, they set forth to confront the darkness that threatened everything they had created, and in the highest tower of the onyx spire, young Orion watched his parents depart, one leading a column of armed warriors, the other vanishing into the morning mist with her small team of spirit wolves. Though only 4 years old, he understood with preternatural clarity what hung in the balance, the future his parents envisioned, the balance they had sacrificed to build. "Both wolves together," he whispered, his small hands pressed against the cold glass. "That's how you'll win."